Chapter 91. The Dragon's Interception. Upon hearing Samir's words, the Flame Tribe members hesitated for a moment. A trembling old elf reluctantly touched the bag in his hand, lifting a corner to reveal several thick, ornate, ancient books. His voice was full of bitterness. These are the paper books we risked our lives to bring out from the elf forest years ago. They are the millennium heritage of the elf clan. If we leave them behind, then the elves. Samir looked at him with a complicated expression and sighed. The mother goddess has returned, civilization can continue. But if the elves die, then there will be nothing left. Philosier touched the thick genealogical record of the flame tribe she carried, a muddled tear gleamed at the corner of her eye. Alas! She sighed, and under the disbelieving gazes of the old elves, she resolutely threw that heavy genealogical book, which had recorded the history and glory of the flame tribe for thousands of years, to the ground. Clan leader! Several old elves gasped in shock. Philosier glanced at them and released the aura of the black iron upper from her body. In an instant, all the old elves fell silent, looking at her with pleading eyes. Philosier avoided their gaze, her voice as cold and hard as iron, carrying an undeniable authority. History is written by civilizations, and the vessel of the silver civilization will always be the elves themselves. If we can't even protect ourselves, then these books are better left. Look at the children in the tribe. We still have a future, we still have hope. We have lived a life of wandering and hardship, we cannot let them live the same life. Having said that, she loudly ordered with her aged voice. Everyone, drop the heavy loads and food supplies. Take only weapons and protect the children, break through at full speed. Seeing their revered old clan leader act like this, the elves hesitated for a moment, then steeled themselves and threw down their luggage. For a moment, some sobs broke out in the crowd. The old elves, with red eyes, drew their weapons, glancing mournfully at the items on the ground, and followed with a roar, "Break through! We break through!" Countless magical glows radiated from their bodies. These old elves, having lived until now, although aged, were once the mightiest warriors of the elf clan. Watching the tribe's people transform their grief into strength, for a moment, Philosier felt a bit dazed. She felt as if she was back in those days of leading the elf army, desperately breaking through from the elf forest under the siege of the human, beastman, and half-dragon lion. Taking a deep breath, she raised her flame staff, which had been passed down for 1,000 years. "Friends, let us go. Let us go home." A dazzling magic power glow erupted from her staff, causing the plants ahead to part and create a path automatically. 3-ring spell, jungle command. The more than 200 elves reformed their ranks, with all the aged old elves moving to the outer edge, elf warriors and elf wanderers leading the charge, and mages, druids, and elf archers forming the rear guard. Meanwhile, the young and strong carried the young elves and were protected in the middle of the formation. "Charge!" They shouted in unison, charging down the path opened by the clan leader. And after they had passed, the plants closed again, hiding the original path. Not good. Those elves are attempting to break out. In the distance, the half-beast scout, who had been persistently watching them, saw them leave, quickly blowing the horn again. Hidden within the elf forest, the half-beast squad also started to move under the horn's signal. "The scouts are sending messages, take them out." Hearing the horn of the scouts, Samir's expression changed, shouting to the elf hunters in the group. A few elf hunters hesitated, instinctively aiming at their opponent's limbs. At that moment, an old elf snatched a bow, aimed at the half-beast scout, and fired. In a flash, the arrow pierced the throat of the half-beast. Afterward, the old elf looked at the hunters, eyes red, and said, "In such times, show no mercy. Remember how they have treated us over the years. Is your accurate archery just for target practice? Even if the killing leads us to hell and death, we must carve a path for the flame tribe." Hearing his words, a flash of shame crossed the faces of the elf hunters. But soon, their expressions turned resolute, each raising their bow and arrow. Meanwhile, the main half-beast force, guided by the horn, finally intercepted the elves of the flame tribe. Nearly 100 fully armed half-beasts emerged from the forest, their bodies shimmering with divine power under the priest's divine arts, blocking the elves' path. And at the same time, more half-beasts were rushing from further within the forest. "Leave no old elves behind, capture all females and young elves alive." In the half-beast squad, the leading priest shouted loudly. "Humph!" Samir snorted coldly, an immense magic power gathering within him. Having received Eve's divine favor, he had become a level 41 silver lower natural priest. Yet, in truth, he possessed another class. Druid. As he advanced in the natural priest profession, his druid profession also received feedback, equally advancing to silver lower. This was the true reason Eve chose him to find the elves. To protect the secret of the mother goddess, Samir intended not to use divine arts lightly, but he could employ the magic unique to druids. And with the undulating incantations, countless thick vines burst from the soil, entwining the approaching half-beasts. Mid-level druid. Among the half-beasts, a priest shrieked, causing the entire squad's momentum to stall. Mid-level, that already represented the rank of silver. In the entire rock cave tribe, only the high priest possessed that strength. In an instant, the half-beasts were somewhat disorganized. The old elves at the front of the formation were invigorated, drawing their weapons and seizing the chance to hack down the unfortunate half-beasts. However, upon closer inspection, one would find that the elves did not pursue the half-beasts to extermination. Once they lost the ability to fight, they were not pursued further. Mercy. It was the glory of the elf clan and also its sorrow. Samir's magic was like a disruptive weight cast into the scales of war. The potent control magic was unleashed, and almost instantly, the half-beast's combat capability was diminished. Facing the desperate elves, the melee-inclined opponents suddenly collapsed. However, even with silver-level strength, Samir could not control all the half-beasts. Many half-beasts still managed to break through, clashing with the elves. And once the battle was joined, the disparity became evident. The old elves, ultimately being advanced in age, while most of the half-beasts were in their prime. They naturally had the upper hand in physique and stamina, and with orders for the complete elimination of the old elves, within mere moments, several old elves had fallen. Seeing her fallen people, Felozier's eyes turned red. Every old elf who survived to this point was her comrade. And every old elf, having experienced the passage of time, possessed countless knowledge. In peaceful times, each elder would be the most precious treasure of the tribe. But now, they had to fight desperately for the future of the tribe. Felosier closed her eyes, then reopened them fiercely. She turned her sorrow into strength, continuously casting magic shields on the tribe's people at the front, while she roared. Kill! We break through! The old elves' sacrifice was not in vain, they also exhausted the half-beast's strength. Fighting desperately, they indeed tore open a path through the encirclement. Seeing the forest ahead, Samir's eyes lit up, shouting, "We're about to break through! Everyone, push harder, disengage quickly, do not entangle with the half-beasts." After speaking, he glanced at the injured old tribespeople in the lineup, gritting his teeth. "Elders and the wounded, stay behind to cover." After speaking, he said to Felosier, "Felosier, lead the tribespeople in breaking through, and I will also stay to assist in covering." Felosier's eyes narrowed, wanting to say something, but seeing Samir's determined gaze, she ultimately nodded. "You must catch up." After speaking, she raised the staff and shouted again. "Break through." Then she led the remaining tribespeople onward. The priest hidden within the half-beast squad's face changed. "Not good. They're about to break through. Quick! Quickly summon Lord Merrill. We can't let them break through." An accompanying half-beast received the instruction, quickly pulling out a horn and blowing it to the sky. Oh! The horn's sound was incredibly loud, reaching far into the distance. And soon, countless birds flew out of the forest, as if startled by something, scattering widely. "Rua!" An excited screech echoed from the sky. "What sound is that?" The elves immediately became highly alert. However, before they could look up, an overwhelming pressure descended upon the scene. Everyone, including the half-beasts, involuntarily shivered for a moment. A massive shadow enveloped the elves who had broken through. Felosier slowly raised her head. She saw an intimidating gargantuan creature. With a sinister appearance, jet-black scales, a skull-like head, and those distinctive spines and horns atop it. In that instant, her pupils shrank dramatically, and she couldn't help but cry out. "A black dragon! Black dragon! Among all the dragons in the Segis world, the most violent, vile, evil, ferocious, and also the most infamous existence." Chapter 92. In the Segis world, intelligent beings are classified by their natural power as they reach adulthood into ordinary races, Black Iron race, Silver race, and Gold race. And dragons, with a history as ancient as the Segis world itself, are undoubtedly the elites of the gold race, almost invincible among their level. Moreover, as a race with a longer lifespan than even the elves, when dragons live long enough, their power can break past worldly limits, reaching legendary or even demigod status. The oldest dragons have strength that even the true god would fear. Similar to certain fantasy stories on Blue Star, the dragons of the Segis world are divided into two camps, metallic dragons and colored dragons. Unlike the kind and peaceful metallic dragons, all colored dragons inherently possess an evil and bloodthirsty nature, with black dragons standing out for their cruel disposition. Therefore, when Phil Osier saw the ferocious black dragon in the sky, she felt something was wrong. It was a black dragon with a wingspan of nearly 20 meters, still young, but its dragon presence was gradually emerging. Silver upper. This was a juvenile black dragon with silver upper level power. Black dragon. Upon hearing Phil Osier's exclamation, the young black dragon's expression immediately turned dangerous. It roared Rua with bared fangs, angrily shouting. Black dragon, black dragon. You're a black dragon. Your entire family are black dragons. The great Lord Merrill is not a black dragon. She is a noble and exalted silver dragon. Rua. Evil intelligent beings. You will face the righteous judgment of Lord Merrill. Half-beast. Elf. Silver. Silver dragon? Listening to the crisp and angry common tongue, everyone was stunned. Looking again at the ferocious black scales, the horns, and skeletal face mask unique to black dragons, the elves were momentarily bewildered. Is this black dragon a bit out of its mind? However, now is not the time to question if this dragon has some issues. Because as it roared, the attacking dragon breath came rushing towards them. It was a line-shaped strong acid breath belonging to black dragons, extremely corrosive. Samir's face changed dramatically, and he hurriedly summoned a wooden shield for defense. But the silver-level wooden shield was like paper under the black dragon's breath, instantly corroded with a large hole. Acid splattered, and several young elves in its path were seriously injured instantly. A distant half-beast priest saw this and quickly shouted. Lord Merrill, please don't be too heavy-handed. Capture them alive. You must capture them alive. Just prevent their escape. Upon hearing the half-beast's shout, the black dragon turned its head, looking at them with dissatisfaction. You are too merciful. To fight evil, you must impose the harshest punishment. Half-beast. Elf. Although the black dragon said this, it no longer spewed dragon breath but instead roared Rua, Rua while flapping its wings and using diving and biting motions to prevent the elves from leaving. A non-standard evil black dragon obeying the half-beast's command. The elves' expressions changed. And as the young black dragon blocked the elves, the main force of the half-beasts finally arrived. More than 200 half-beasts swarmed from all directions, trapping the elves who were about to escape the battlefield once more. Samir's expression shifted several times. Then, he grit his teeth and roared at the dragon in the sky. Evil dragon, your opponent, is me. After speaking, he charged out of the elves group and took a few steps to the black dragon below. Reaching out, he pulled out a golden leaf. Samir lifted the leaf reverently, muttering incantations, and in an instant, the leaf in his hand burst with brilliant divine power glow. World Tree Leaf! Could there still be such a thing in the elf clan? The half-beast priest immediately recognized the origin of the leaf. His face changed as he shouted skyward. No, Lord Merrill, quickly dodge. However, it was already too late. Only to see the world tree leaf turn to ash in a moment, and dazzling holy light formed a prison, enveloping the black dragon. Light prison. A gold-level controlling divine art. This was a divine art that could serve as both defense and a prison. The young black dragon Merrill let out an angry roar and rushed against the prison. However, under its impact, the prison only slightly shook. Unwilling, it breathed again, but the light prison merely flickered, still trapping it firmly. Below, Samir struggled to maintain the divine art while continuously coughing up blood. Controlling a high-level divine art was still too much for him at this point. This was not a one-time attack divine art but required prolonged control by the caster. Although the black dragon could not break free for the time being, each collision caused Samir, whose mind was connected to the light prison, to suffer some damage as well. Rua! Evil bastard! Let go of the great Lord Merrill. Otherwise, Lord Merrill will surely eat you. Within the prison came the irate roars of the black dragon. Samir ignored the furious black dragon and instead looked towards the elven group, shouting while coughing blood. Break through! While I can still control it, everyone break through! Whoever can get out, get out! However, the elves at that moment had already entered the quagmire of battle. The encirclement by the half-beasts had completely closed, and without Samir's magic support, the elves could only hold together, struggling to fend off the half-beasts' assault. With the continuous depletion of magic power and gradual decrease in physical strength, their defeat was only a matter of time. Not to mention, the black dragon's collisions against the prison were becoming increasingly fierce, and breaking out of the cage was just a matter of time. The elves had lost their best chance to break through the moment the black dragon appeared. Looking at the besieged elves, the half-beast priest was extremely excited. Fight slowly, they can't last longer than us. Capture all the women and children alive, and the high priest will reward heavily. Upon hearing the priest's words, the half-beasts became even more enthusiastic. And the elves' casualties continued to rise. Elderly elves kept falling, and even the younger elves joined the fight in their place. Seeing her people gradually decrease, Philosier was racked with pain. Could this be the end? But the morale of the half-beasts grew stronger and stronger. Because they had already noticed that the elves were a spent force. No. We must find a way to break through, even if only one of us can escape. Philosier bit her lip, preparing to burn her magic power and vitality, sacrificing herself to find a breakthrough opportunity for her people. Yet just as she was about to activate her magic power, a commotion erupted behind the half-beasts. In the air, faint magic fluctuations arrived from afar, accompanied by violent explosions and distant shouting. Philosier paused her movements. She quickly raised her head, looking towards the depths of the forest. The rear of the half-beast force began to become chaotic, and shouts grew ever more distinct. Kill! The Flame Clan is surrounded. Hurry up! Time is life. Don't let a single NPC fall. For the honor of the Elf Clan, charge! Take down the half-beasts. Yura! With enthusiasm and frenzy in the shouting, Philosier saw hundreds of young elves appear in her line of sight. Chapter 93. Those were hundreds of fully armed elves. They had various styles, most of them clad in magnificent armor, yet they were all young elves. They wielded all sorts of weapons, their faces twisted in a frenzy, looking at the half-beasts as if they were their mortal enemies. This is too awful. How can we start fighting so quickly? I haven't even eaten yet. This voice carried dissatisfaction. Another NPC has fallen. This voice carried astonishment. Damn it! Everyone, charge quickly! Rescue them! This voice carried urgency. What's that in the sky? Is it a dragon? This voice carried surprise and curiosity. So cool! Screenshot, screenshot! This voice carried excitement. Screenshot my ass! That's the enemy! Get in there and protect the NPCs. They're all experience and contribution points. This voice seemed to be so pained they couldn't breathe. Yes. Fight your way in. Protect the NPCs. Yura. Their voices were filled with madness. The strange elves brought for reinforcements gazed from afar at the falling Flame Clan members, their expressions angry and agitated, like dragons whose reverse scales had been touched. They were the players who had come rushing. After previously encircling the half-beast hunting team, and given all those hardcore players from the second beta test, the number of players reaching Black Iron level had already approached 400, and this time they went all out. After all, in terms of experience, the rewards for all the main storyline tasks were incredibly rich. Listening to their shouts, feeling the genuine concern in their words, the Flame Tribe elves' eyes reddened. Elves! It's the elves! Our clan has come to help us! An old elf choked out. In an instant, the morale of the Flame Tribe was newly invigorated. And the half-beast's formation was a bit bewildered by this sudden assault. Where did so many elves come from suddenly? The half-beast priest's scalp tingled as he looked at the hundreds of tall figures and magnificent equipment behind them. The giant mountain priest had not revealed Blackstone's secret operation, and Euler's oracle had not been announced, so the ordinary priests and half-beasts did not yet know the changes in the elf forest. These few hundred elves popping up suddenly had genuinely frightened them. While Philosier's eyes lit up, she raised her magic wand and commanded. Reinforcements have arrived. Everyone work together, let's break through. However, when the strange elves engaged them, the half-beasts were dumbfounded. Because they discovered these elves' strength was pathetically weak, at most mid-level black iron lower, and their combat experience was very poor. Just one exchange, and several elves were cut down like vegetables. So weak. The half-beasts looked at the elves knocked down with just one blow, dumbfounded. The priest's eyes brightened, shouting, "This is a bunch of rookies. Capture these young elves." But the Flame Clan, watching the young elves starting to fall, showed expressions of guilt and sadness. The few dozens of old elves remaining exchanged glances and nodded in succession. Their aura changed, and they began to fight desperately without fear of injury. "Our clan members are creating opportunities for us with their blood and lives. We must break through," they shouted as they charged into the half-beasts for slaughter. And watching these dozens of old elves fighting as if abandoning their lives, the players' eyes reddened. "Damn! Don't, Grandma, Grandpa! Experience points! It's all experience points and contribution. My heart aches. Charge! Go help them! Where's Lord L? Where is Lord L? Requesting support!" They shouted, fought, and also went all out. And as they clashed again, gradually, the half-beasts were filled with shock. Because although these charging elves were weak, they were fearless of death. They did everything they could to harm the half-beasts, even launching suicide attacks. Moreover, they seemed not to care about their injuries at all, even with their last breath, they wanted to bite off a piece of flesh from the half-beasts. Many half-beasts were suddenly hugged by these crazed elves, and upon their shout of "Fire on me," they were engulfed by other elves' magic. "They've gone crazy! These elves have gone crazy!" The half-beast priest was utterly stunned looking at these elves who didn't care for even their companions' lives. The Flame Tribe was also stunned. Philosier looked at the young elves charging suicidally, filled with heartache, moved, and confusion. She shouted, "Children! Don't throw your lives away!" However, these elves who came to their aid did not stop, and casualties rapidly mounted. In less than 10 minutes, dozens had died. For a time, the Flame Tribe's eyes also reddened. In all these years, they had never seen the elf clan suffer such heavy losses in such a short time. Moreover, they were all young lives. "Children, don't throw your lives away. Kill them. Break through. Evil half-beasts. I will fight you with my life." All the Flame Clan became furious and began fighting desperately. Young lives, they were the future of the Elf Clan. And seeing the Flame Clan start fighting for their lives, the players' eyes reddened even more. "Damn! Grandma, Grandpa, Big Brother, Big Sister! Don't throw your lives away! Don't worry about us! We won't die!" Another one died. "Oh my God! My heart aches so much! Kill them quickly! One for one! Sacrifice to handle these half-beasts!" They fought with increased aggression. "They've gone mad! All these elves have gone mad!" The half-beast priest was utterly stunned looking at the elves who no longer feared for their lives. And at this moment, a thin figure suddenly dashed out from the crowd. It was a short elf youth, with silver hair and blue eyes, his young face carrying some resilience and anger. He wielded an elf short sword, weaving through the half-beasts. Every half-beast he engaged with was quickly disarmed and severely injured. The players' morale soared instantly. "Lord L has come to support us. Nice going, L." They immediately followed L's actions, ganging up on the half-beasts he had severely injured. In no time the half-beasts' casualties rapidly increased, and their morale plummeted. "Silver! Another silver!" Looking at L weaving through, the half-beast priest's expression was terrified. It was chaos. It was complete chaos. If the player's arrival could still make the half-beasts hold on, then L at silver level strength became the tipping point that overturned the balance. The half-beast formation finally began to collapse. The players charging at the forefront finally connected with the Flame Clan members. "Brave children!" Looking at the players rushing up, Philosier's expression was agitated. She waved her magic wand, preparing to continue fighting. But a player suddenly charged forward, blocking her. There was a squelch sound, and hot blood splattered over her. A half-beast's long sword stabbed into that player's chest. In an instant, Philosier was stunned. She hurriedly held the young clansman coughing up blood, her eyes tearful. Why? And the player, while spewing blood, smiled at her, a solemn expression. "The goddess said, not to let you get hurt, we won't let you get hurt. But Falozier's expression was sorrowful. Even if you didn't block, I could have blocked him. Player. Cough, cough. He coughed up 2 mouthfuls of blood, his neck twisted, and he died. Similar scenes began to play out everywhere. Child. I'm already old, not worth you blocking a blow for. Child. Get up, stay strong. Why? Why would you do this? Ah. Damn half-beasts, they're all so young, all the future of the elf clan. The players joined the Flame clan's ranks but no longer proactively fought the half-beasts. Instead, they recklessly protected the Flame tribe elves, fearing they'd suffer even a scratch. Even at the cost of their own lives. This moved the Flame tribe elves yet left them unable to understand. They felt for a moment as though they'd become like the elf royal family breaking through a siege centuries ago, being fiercely protected by fellow clan members. And gradually, the battlefield's situation reversed, and the half-beasts began to flee under El and some players' pursuit. The young black dragon Meryl in the sky, however, remained unable to break through the barrier. It could only continuously crash into the cage of light while looking at El and the players hunting half-beasts, roaring in anger. Indeed, the evil intelligent races are this cruel. Ruaa. I will never spare you. As for the elves who died at the hands of the half-beasts, it completely ignored. Because in Meryl's view, an evil race deserved the punishment of death. And listening to the black dragon's roar, the players were utterly bewildered. Evil intelligent races. Is it, talking about us? Chapter 94. In a way, it seems pretty logical. A second test player mumbled quietly while looking at a dozen warriors of the first test players, their faces covered in blood, who were chasing after the half-beast behind El, laughing madly with bloodlust. However, he was soon given a harsh headbutt from Demasha nearby. Don't talk nonsense. We are the embodiment of kindness and justice, the chosen ones under the goddess. Second test player. Well. Experience is necessary, but the character settings can't crumble either. After all, the appeal of this game is the immersive experience. Elves of the Flame tribe are watching from the side. Players didn't forget the mission this time and the potential impact it might have afterward. NPCs. These elves are future NPCs stationed in Felenqui. Building good relationships with them might come in handy someday. That's why players were fighting so desperately in this battle, with their inner drama queens going wild. On the way to support, some big shot deeply analyzed this mission on the official forum. According to the planner's usual tendencies, this rescue mission would definitely determine the game's storyline direction again. And the analysis and speculation from the big shots suggested that similar to letting players build their newbie villages, these rescued elves might also become important NPCs in the new main city, Felenqui. Yes, that's exactly what Eve thought. However, the Flame tribe didn't know the intricacies involved, and they certainly didn't know that these courageous young elves weren't afraid of death at all. They looked at these brave players, feeling moved. And the players looked at the system prompts that occasionally popped up, so-and-so's favorability towards you increased by 40 points, and felt utterly delighted, displaying even more solemn acts of protection. Although most elves of the Flame tribe were shallow believers, and devout followers weren't many, as long as they were believers, Eve could connect them to the player's game system. In this situation, with the believer's emotions, it was easy for her to materialize these favorability points. And for the players, this was a great opportunity to boost favorability. The benefits of increasing NPC's favorability were evident from looking at Limu and Demasha. The former had such high favorability with Alice that she would answer almost all his questions, even willing to let him learn about arrays alongside the cuckoo bird. And the latter, after being locked up with Elle for a while, somehow managed to boost the young boy's favorability to the max. Now that guy was fooling the young boy into hunting demon beasts everywhere, while he was leading the team to reap rewards madly, envying a crowd of players. But now, another opportunity was at hand. Over 200 elf NPCs. According to elven settings, their lifespan was extremely long and they loved collecting knowledge. Players couldn't believe that after building good relationships with them, they wouldn't be able to, well, learn something from them. And the reality was indeed exhilarating. Everyone could see NPC favorability skyrocketing like a rocket. Then, everyone got even more excited, treating the elves of the Flame tribe like fellow villagers. And the reversal of the battlefield situation finally led to the collective rout of the half-beast. Even the priest, who was the commander, fled in terror under El's chase. Many players also started following El to hunt down the fleeing half-beast, with a hint of annihilation in the air. After all, half-beast were living experience points and contribution points too, not to mention that El was leading the way, and they only needed to reap. Emotions were contagious, and their madness even infected some young elves of the Flame clan. They also joined the pursuit with red eyes. Phil Osier and a group of old elves could only shout worriedly, "Stop chasing! Stop chasing!" And at this moment, a childish, angry roar suddenly echoed from the sky. Rua! Then, the cage of light suddenly burst into golden light, resulting in numerous cracks that finally shattered with a loud crash. And below, Samir's face turned pale as he spat out a mouthful of blood, subsequently falling to the ground unconscious. The black dragon Meryl was free from the cage. Its eyes flushed red with extreme anger. "Evil sentient beings, you will pay for your actions." Seeing the freed black dragon, the elves and players hunting the half-beast stopped, looking gravely at this giant creature in the sky. It's free. Isn't this black dragon the boss of this mission?" Players looked cautiously yet excitedly at the dragon in the sky. Since entering the game, it was the first time they saw a real dragon. A living one. Tianqiao people had a special affection for dragons. Even if this dragon was merely a giant lizard from Western fantasy, just bearing the name dragon was enough to spark their interest. Seeing the elves below not fearing it at all further enraged Meryl, feeling that its dragon dignity was insulted. It roared once more, unleashing its full dragon might. For a moment, all players fell silent. Unlike divine might acting on the soul, dragon might affected the body directly. Though the black dragon was still juvenile, its full release at the silver upper level was terrifying. Players, whose strength was still weak, involuntarily started trembling, feeling that control over their bodies was slightly delayed. An instinctive fear settled into their hearts. Damn, why am I shivering? Dragon might, this must be the legendary dragon might. It's so strong. The elves of the Flame tribe also turned pale. No good. The black dragon is free. El looked up, his gaze filled with caution toward black dragon Meryl. Black dragon. His mood sank continually. The black dragon at the silver upper level, although still juvenile, everyone here combined probably wouldn't be its match. Grandfather had once told him that a black dragon of this strength was enough to slaughter a remote human city. Meryl's gaze swept across the battlefield, eyes filled with danger, ultimately locking onto El. It was he who had caused the half-beast's defeat just now. Thoughts of this kind filled Meryl's heart with growing anger. You evil beings! To make Lord Meryl look so bad is a grave sin. It roared. Die! It then aimed at El and spewed corrosive dragon breath. Not good. Get out of the way. Seeing the dragon breath spewing out, the elves of the Flame tribe cried out in astonishment. They had just witnessed the devastating power of dragon breath. El also looked panicked and hurriedly dodged. He watched as the linear dragon breath struck where he originally stood, instantly corroding a deep, smoking hole several meters in radius, with no visible bottom. All plants caught in the spread turned to ash in a moment. The power was comparable to 5-ring magic. And yet, it was nothing more than a dragon's phlegm. Even though he dodged in time, El's arm was grazed slightly. He let out a painful grunt as his entire arm began to rot and wither in an instant, quickly spreading to his body. El turned pale, gritting his teeth and mercilessly cut off his arm, stopping the spread of the rot. Seeing that one breath hadn't killed El, Black Dragon Meryl grew even more furious. It puffed out its cheeks again, brewing a larger dragon breath, instantly spewing it out. This time, the speed was faster, covering a wider area and lasting longer. El had no time to avoid it. No! Danger! Everyone shouted in alarm. And just as the dragon breath was about to hit El, a dazzling holy light suddenly descended. The reason divine favored were called as such was because they devoted their entire mind and body to the true God, always living under the watch of the true God. Chapter 95. Under everyone's astonished gazes, El suddenly radiated a golden light, and the black dragon's breath evaporated like mist the moment it approached him, causing not even the slightest harm. Not only that, but at the very instant the light enveloped El, his injuries began to heal rapidly, and even his severed arm grew back. The elves of the Flame tribe looked at this miraculous scene with their mouths agape in shock. Then, an elder elf suddenly trembled with a sharp intake of breath, exclaiming out loud. The power of life! It's the power of life! This is the life force wielded by the Mother Goddess! He is a divine favored of the Mother Goddess. It's the Mother Goddess, it's the Mother Goddess. She has noticed us through the divine favored. Divine favored. The remaining elves gazed at El, their expressions transforming from astonishment to excitement, and then from excitement to ecstatic joy. Nothing could prove the revival of the true god more than the appearance of a divine favored. In an instant, the elder elves were moved to tears and all kneeled, continuously drawing the symbol of Mother Nature on their chests, trembling with emotion as they choked out. Praise Mother Nature, praise the goddess of life, praise the great elven sovereign. Mother Goddess, we have returned. Their kneeling incited a chain reaction, and soon, all of the Flame Tribe elves had fallen to their knees. El looked at his kneeling tribesmen, momentarily at a loss. Though a divine favored, he was merely an 80-year-old child. However, he quickly responded, also kneeling down and fervently shouting towards the core of the elf forest. Praise Mother Nature, praise the goddess of life, praise the great elven sovereign Yggdrasil. The tone was fervent. In an instant, all the native elves knelt down, leaving the players bewildered. However, they soon realized something as well. The first beta players who had participated in the siege against Blackstone excitedly said. The goddess! It's the goddess! Eve Goddess is probably appearing again. The storyline animation is coming. Quick, start recording. Eve Goddess! Other than creating characters, players who hadn't seen the embodiment of the goddess in person had their eyes lit up. If asked which NPC in Elf Kingdom most intrigued and was most adored by players, it would undoubtedly be Eve Goddess. As the main character of the faction in the large-scale virtual game Elf Kingdom, Eve Yggdrasil received countless fanfare with her stunning beauty, kind and benevolent nature, and generous heart. On the official website, players even established a fan club for the goddess. And the previous storyline animations where the goddess appeared had caused players to fawn over them once uploaded to the Blue Star Network. Although it's a game, who wouldn't love to fight for a powerful and beautiful lady? Even though it's just a beta, the name of Eve Yggdrasil became just as popular across the Blue Star Network along with the overwhelming popularity of Elf Kingdom. For a while, players expertly turned on the recording function and joined the crowd in kneeling, also shouting towards the World Tree's direction with eagerness. Praise Mother Nature, praise the goddess of life, praise the great elven sovereign Eve Yggdrasil. Meanwhile, they occasionally looked around discreetly. As the words fell, even more brilliant radiance began to rain from the heavens. In an instant, countless green particles flew in from all directions, flooding into everyone's bodies. And their injuries began to heal swiftly as well. Lost limbs regrew, wounds recovered, even those critically injured and on the brink of death among the elves regained health in a moment. As the divine power gentle light poured down, even the plants in the forest were affected. They sprouted and bloomed, paying homage to the goddess of nature and life. In a daze, the players seemed to see a beautiful goddess, crowned with a floral divine crown, dressed in an exquisite gown, followed by radiant holy light. For a moment, it seemed as if heaven and earth paled in comparison. However, when they rubbed their eyes and looked again, it seemed as if there was nothing there. Feeling the life force flooding into their bodies, the expressions of the native elves grew more devout, burying their heads even deeper. At this moment, they heard a gentle, sacred voice by their ears. Welcome, back. That voice seemed to echo directly in their hearts, carrying a sense of timelessness, as if crossing through eternity. Simultaneously majestic yet cordial. In an instant, all the native elves became teary-eyed, their voices choked. Mother Goddess! This was the voice of the Mother Goddess. Mother Goddess had not forgotten them. The cries of grief echoed continuously among the elves. Meanwhile, in the sky, the black dragon Meryl's eyes widened instantly. Watching the divine-like changes around it, it instinctively swallowed, an unprecedented sense of crisis washing over it. The divine, a true god, it really is a true god. For a moment, Meryl was so frightened that it couldn't even speak in common language, muttering directly in Draconic. What the hell? How could there still be a true god on the Sedges continent? Although unaware of which true god it was, such miraculous power could only be wielded by a true god. And recalling all the myths regarding true gods within the dragon clan, Meryl's heart was instantly filled with panic. It no longer cared about the kneeling elves below, turning around to flee. No kidding. As the most long-lived and growth potential worldly race in the Sedges world, dragons were considered a delicacy to true gods. Every true god found interest in recruiting dragons. Because the power of belief provided by a dragon was considerable, not to mention they were the perfect mounts and watchdogs for true gods. Moreover, some evil gods were rumored to enjoy consuming dragon crystals and drinking dragon blood. There were even divines who would use dragons as toys for their entertainment. Once targeted by a true god, a dragon's freedom was lost, and they became insignificant. As Black Dragon Merrill, aspiring to be a magnificent dragon promoting justice, it refused to lose its precious freedom. Merrill took a deep breath, tucking its tail, flapping its wings, and swiftly retreating. Run! Run quickly! If I don't, my future life as a dragon might be ruined. And at this moment, it suddenly heard an intriguing voice echoing in its heart. Black Dragon! That voice was incredibly majestic with a hint of curiosity. Instantly, the little black dragon involuntarily shivered. Only those superior beings could directly penetrate a dragon's mental defenses and make their voice resonate in its heart. A true god! It truly was a true god. At this moment, it wanted nothing more, desperately flying back with all its might. Cursing itself internally for going on a spree with the half-beasts. It regretted every bit of it. If it had known an evil god was behind this evil intelligent race, even a bold Merrill wouldn't have dared to come. Then, it heard the dreadful voice again. Coincidentally, the little town lacks a gatekeeper. Gatekeeper. Merrill's eyes widened, almost petrified with fear. It gritted its teeth, flapping its little wings even faster. However, a golden light suddenly descended from the sky. The brilliant holy light transformed into a dazzling rope, effortlessly binding Merrill in its terrified gaze. And it wrapped around its mouth too. With a plop, the unlucky little black dragon fell from the sky, nose diving into the ground. Chapter 96. The black dragon fell to the ground as the glow of divine power slowly faded, and everything returned to its original state. It seemed as if the recent divine miracle was merely an illusion. Meanwhile, all players once again received a new system message. Ding! Successfully escorted a total of 181 elves from the Flame Tribe. Deliver them to Felinqui to complete the mission. Rewards will be distributed based on mission contribution and the number of elves successfully escorted. Ding! Triggered side storyline, transport the captured Black Dragon to Elf Town. Mission reward, 50 contribution points. Capture the Black Dragon. Their eyes brightened, and they simultaneously turned to look at Merrill, who lay fallen on the ground, tightly bound by ropes transformed from divine power. Looking at the curious gazes from the elves, Merrill felt humiliated and furious. She wanted to open her mouth to speak, but under the tight bind of the ropes, she could only make muffled whimpers. The goddess is so powerful. She just captured the Black Dragon. After all, she is a true god. The players, while marveling and excited, moved closer to Merrill. They ignored Merrill's resentful gaze and, while boldly and curiously touching her scales, excitedly took screenshots as souvenirs. This Black Dragon is so cool. Its scales are really tough. Let's take a group photo. Wait, let me strike a pose. Merrill. At the same time, the players occasionally voiced some ideas that terrified Black Dragon Merrill. I wonder if its scales can be made into a shield, they feel so sturdy. I remember in fantasy stories, it is said that drinking dragon blood grants powerful strength. I wonder if its blood is useful. By the way, is there any way to tame it as a mount? A dragon knight, just thinking about it is so cool. Merrill. She whimpered softly and looked resentfully at these despicable creatures. How cruel the intelligent species are. So evil. These long-eared beings are truly evil. They not only want my scales but also want to drink my blood, and even want the great Merrill to serve as a mount. Oh heavens! Is my life as a dragon really going to end here? I haven't become the greatest dragon yet, I am not willing to accept this. What will become of my future? As she thought about it, tears welled up in her eyes. What the heck? It's crying. This Black Dragon is unbelievably timid. Merrill. She turned her head away, closed her eyes, and angrily started to play dead. Meanwhile, the elves of the Flame Tribe, after cheering, fell into sorrow. In this breakout, dozens of the old elves had died in battle. The remaining tribe members sorrowfully gathered the bodies of their fallen comrades, intending to use magical flames for cremation. This was the elf forest. In elven tradition, cremating the bodies of the deceased and scattering the ashes in the elf forest represented returning to their roots, while their souls would ascend to the mother goddess's heaven. However, while gathering the bodies, the elves were astonished to find that the bodies of the young fallen tribe members had disappeared. Not only that, but they were surprised to see that the surviving young tribe members seemed not to mourn the passing of their companions at all. In fact, they seemed quite excited. Even though many had sorrowful expressions, something about it all seemed off. It seemed they were suppressing their true emotions. The Flame tribe members couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but they couldn't put their finger on it. Before they could ask anything, the players joined them in their mourning, wearing expressions of grief and sorrow for the fallen old elves, thus swallowing any words left in their throats. El, after his body recovered, intended to pursue the fleeing half-beasts once more. Though the half-beasts had fled far away when the Mother Goddess's power descended, El was still unsettled. Just as he was about to depart, the voice of the Mother Goddess echoed in his mind. No need to pursue them. No need? El paused. However, since the Mother Goddess said there was no need to pursue, he decided to abandon the chase. He then assisted the Flame tribe in gathering the bodies of their fallen people, while the players enthusiastically assisted the elves in organizing the books they had abandoned. Finally, they excitedly dragged along their spoils of war, the feigning dead black dragon Meryl surrounding the native elves as they began their journey back. The forest's edge. The half-beast priest fled hastily, accompanied by guards. For this ambush, the Rock Cave tribe had dispatched over 300 half-orc warriors, all in their prime. However, after encountering those crazy elves and that frail silver knight, the half-orcs died in frustration one after another. Now, only just over 100 had managed to escape. Moreover, what terrified the half-beast priest even more was that Lord Merrill had not returned. Even though there were no pursuers behind them, this discovery horrified him. The World Tree's leaf, just its power wouldn't be able to control Lord Merrill for so long, could it be? An even more terrifying enemy exists. Just now, I seemed to sense a power fluctuation similar to divine power. Although I couldn't sense the specific aura, that intense fluctuation must be the power of a true god. As he pondered, he became more terrified, more aghast. At this moment, the fleeing group suddenly halted. What's happening? The half-beast priest's heart tightened, and he looked ahead. At some point, a tall figure appeared at the exit of the elf forest. She was cloaked head to toe in a black robe, dark grey hair hanging from her hood, and a pair of crimson eyes quietly watching the half-beast squad. Her expression was calm, as if she were looking at a group of the dead. The half-beast priest's pupils narrowed slightly. Because, he couldn't sense this person's presence at all. Another possibility was that the other party possessed a great ability to conceal presence or held power far beyond his imagination. He was about to say something when a massive pressure suddenly emanated from the mysterious figure. In an instant, the heart of every half-orc filled with shock, as the pressure was countless times stronger than that of the black dragon Meryl earlier. High-level professionals. This was a high-level professional who had achieved golden power. The half-beast priest screamed frantically in his heart, but no words came out of his mouth. Then, the mysterious figure suddenly raised her head, and a cold, deathly divine power burst forth from her, radiating outward. All the half-orcs she touched froze, then fell, lifeless. And perceiving the aura of that divine power, the half-beast priest's eyes widened in horror. Death! Death! Death God's favor! He couldn't finish his sentence before likewise losing his breath. Over 100 half-orcs fell inexplicably. Not a single one escaped. At this moment, the tall silhouette waved her hands once more, unleashing a surge of life force that quickly consumed all remaining life energy from the half-orcs. She then transformed again, taking the form of Eve. If you kill so many on my territory, don't think you can escape. Leaving those words behind, she transformed into radiant light and slowly disappeared. Chapter 97. After using a guise as death gods favored to eliminate the fleeing half-beast, Eve's consciousness returned to the divine space. With this demonstration of a divine miracle before the Flame clan, her standing among these native elves increased once more. In an instant, nearly half of what were originally over 100 casual believers directly crossed over to become devout believers. They collectively provided Eve with 7 points of divine power. Moreover, the feedback from the elf souls brought about by the direct and indirect killing of more than 300 half-beasts was also considerable. Over time, although this feedback from the elf souls had greatly diminished compared to the beginning, it still amassed to 40 points of divine power. Yet, Eve estimated that perhaps after some more time, this method of obtaining divine power feedback by fulfilling the wishes of elf souls would become completely ineffective. Makes sense, after all, it's been 1,000 years. Although the resentment generated by the elf souls was great, there would always be a time when it would be exhausted or worn out. Aside from the 47 points of divine power acquired, a young black dragon of silver strength, level 66, was an unexpected gain. However, Eve wasn't particularly happy. Because in this mission, a total of 38 elves from the Flame tribe died in battle. And the entire Flame tribe originally only had 219 elves left. The 38 elves who died in battle were all old elves, and their belief was devout in level. This made Eve feel a strong sense of guilt. For not achieving a bloodless rescue this time, a large portion of the blame lay on her. She hadn't anticipated that the half-beast tribe was actually situated near the entrance between the dark mountain range and the elf forest and had prepared an ambush in advance. I overestimated myself. With the return of my strength after escaping a near-death state, I became a bit conceited and failed to communicate with Samir and the others beforehand. Eve self-reflected. If she had been more cautious, if she had assigned the players the task of guidance a bit earlier, perhaps the tragedy could have been avoided. Sighing, Eve thought for a moment, and 38 transparent souls flew from the outside world into her divine space. These were the souls of the deceased elves. Low-level creatures would lose most of their memories when they died, retaining only fragmented and vague memory shards. And if they ascended to the divine country, their souls would completely lose their memory when crossing the crystal wall system. Of course, the priests and priests blessed by the true God were exceptions. Their souls were granted memory protection by the true God while they were still alive. Just like the souls ascending to the divine country, these 38 elves were not priests, so they lost all their memories instantaneously upon entering the divine space. And at the moment when these elf souls entered the divine space, Eve's divine space immediately changed. The original divine space was merely a chaotic void filled with countless swirling green photons, but the moment the believers' souls came in, the entire space began to transform. As if the heavens and earth were opening, the chaotic parts continuously sank, transforming into lands. While above, a sky formed. The photons symbolizing the believers and players turned into twinkling stars, incredibly bright. The souls of the 38 elves reverted to their youthful appearance, transforming into devout elf prayer mergers. And as they became mergers, the barren lands changed again, countless plants emerged from the ground, quickly turning into a forest world suitable for elves to live. Simultaneously, a giant tree sprouted from the center of the world, rapidly growing into the form of the world tree. As she observed the changes in the divine space, a realization dawned upon Eve. Divine country transformation. The divine space is undergoing a transformation into a divine country. In the Segis world, there were two origins for a true god's divine country. One was the development of a divine country on a half-plane by the divine. And the other was to transform one's own divine space, embodying it as a divine country. The former was more convenient, a method pursued by faith-based deities, but it had the weakness of being easily discovered and besieged. The latter was relatively covered, but much tougher to establish, as it meant requiring early spread of faith and complete mastery of godly duties. Only some ancient gods interested in faith would employ the second method. Because to fully master godly duties, the prerequisite was having a divine country. However, without establishing a divine country, ordinary beings would not possess godly duties, so secular creatures aspiring to become true gods could only take the half-plane route. Only those who were already ancient gods could take the second path. However, the previous world tree did not choose to embody her divine country, but rather took the same path as the true god of faith. Her divine country had long since shattered along with her demise and was also not in the Segis world. Eve inherited the legacy of the world tree but did not inherit her divine country. And now, when the soul of the believers entered Eve's divine space, it actually triggered the transformation of the divine space into a divine country. Eve did not stop this transformation. Because this meant that as an ancient god, she would completely grasp the authority belonging to a faith deity. In the future, her utilization of faith would be more efficient than before. Their similar effect would also reflect in the game system, which Eve constructed. It bore an uncanny resemblance to faith channels and would also be somewhat influenced. And after the divine space underwent this transformation into a divine country, Eve completely dispelled the idea of reviving the elves. Because she realized that these mergers provided her with seemingly more faith. Perhaps this is where perspective decides ideology. Initially, she had planned to allow these elves to descend from the world tree in the form of primordial elves. Of course, once they became mergers, the souls of beings, in a sense, unified with a true god and generally couldn't be reborn. However, the moment the transformation to a divine country began, Eve discovered her ability to create elves changed as well. Previously, while she could create bodies, creating souls required a significant expenditure. Actively birthing a primordial elf required an expense even greater than enlightening an oak guardian. Yet now, Eve managed to regain the ability to automatically birth primordial elves. This means that even without expending divine power, she could naturally nurture genuine primordial elves on the world tree. It's just that the speed was quite slow. Eve roughly sensed, without using divine power, she could naturally give birth to one primordial elf per year at most. However, if she used divine power, this speed would accelerate. Roughly every 1 point of divine power spent sped this up by a month, with a maximum acceleration to 30 days. Upon the birth of an elf, the accelerated effect would reset. Meaning, with 11 points of divine power, Eve could utilize a month to birth a primordial elf. The newly born primordial elves would be in a near-adult state and initially have black iron upper peak, level 40, abilities, naturally loyal to Eve. However, unlike the divine favored oak guardians, primordial elves' lives and souls weren't bound to Eve and couldn't enjoy a systematic inheritance. Thus, they were blank slates upon birth, with everything needing to be learned anew. Considering the fragility of their new souls, Eve would at most impart them with some basic knowledge. Forming self-awareness, beliefs and worldviews had to be completed by themselves. Furthermore, they held great potential to advance to higher levels. Because primordial elves, like a player's body, were also innately gifted. However, expending 11 points of divine power for a primordial elf still seemed too extravagant for Eve right now. But after some thought, Eve decided to give birth to one to test the effect. She painfully spent 11 points of divine power, initiating the ability to birth a primordial elf. Nevertheless, no matter how Eve's abilities in life godly duties improved, the player's unique position remained unchanged. Because the revival of natives would weaken their souls each time, but players' consciousness wouldn't. Only the players could be truly repeatedly utilized. At the same time, Uller, the god of winter and hunting, also sensed the death of a large number of believers. Chapter 98. Heavenly Realm, within the divine country of the Silver Frost Ice Field. The heavy clouds in the sky kept rolling, and large snowflakes like goose feathers floated down, while the roaring cold wind kept howling. Countless prayers prostrated on the ground, fearful yet devoutly praying. The weather of the divine country was easily influenced by the mood of the true god. And at this moment, the god of winter and hunting, Uller, was engulfed in anger. Uller had been having bad luck recently. At least, she thought so. First, the matter of secretly collecting World Tree divine blood crystals was discovered by the Supreme God, and she was warned, and then an unknown force ambushed her in the elf forest. Even her divine power avatar was destroyed by a group of lowly mundane creatures, seemingly death gods favored. The reprimand from the Supreme God was tolerable. But having her avatar destroyed by mundane creatures was a slap in her face. The majesty of a true god could not be desecrated. If this incident got out, she, Uller, would become a laughingstock among the gods. What embarrassed her more was that Hela, the death god, likely had a hand in it. But even with suspicion towards death god Hela, due to the disparity in strength, she could do nothing about it. Although both were dignified true gods, Hela had moderate divine power, and her formidable strength was far beyond Uller's. Hela didn't even need to take turns guarding the Pantheon, unlike Uller, who had weak divine power. Soon after, the Pantheon had an incident. A living being unexpectedly completed a divine enthronement in secrecy and silence. It should be known that in the Segis world, the preparations for divine ennoblement were quite complex. The preaching of faith couldn't be concealed, and the energy fluctuations during divine enthronement were massive. Generally speaking, the gods would be informed in advance and would tell the new god to report to the Pantheon after the divine enthronement. But this time, it wasn't until the other party was summoned by the Pantheon did the main gods managing it become aware. And Uller was reprimanded for failing to lead the new god. In addition, the task of finding the new god also fell upon her shoulders. Yet she recently sent out many divine favored and contacted numerous familiar divines, expending great effort to investigate high-level planes where a new god might emerge, but no trace of a new god was found anywhere. She became increasingly frustrated. Now, among the already limited high-level planes, only the Netherworld and the Segis world remained where she hadn't gathered information, and which were relatively likely to witness a divine enthronement. Then considering this newly emerged mysterious deity could easily perceive and enter the Pantheon, coupled with the recent increase in magic power in the Segis plane, Uller strongly suspected this true god had been born on the Segis plane. Yet this puzzled her further. Because, according to the current energy level of the Segis world, it theoretically couldn't support a new god's divine enthronement. And as most of the god's believers were located in the Segis world, if a new god went through divine enthronement in the Segis plane, it would be even more challenging to conceal the fluctuations. Not to mention the hiding of the divine country. Unless there's intervention from another true god. When Euler began asking around about any recent strange changes in the Segis plane, she received the same answer everywhere. The Segis plane was as peaceful as ever that year. Except for the elf forest. At the moment of magic power increase, the elf forest experienced the most significant boost. Admittedly, due to the presence of the world tree, the elf forest was initially one of the magic power source points of the Segis world. The overall magic power increase made a more significant stimulus at magic power source points normal. Yet recalling her believers' encounters in the elf forest and those strange elves, Euler gradually formed a hypothesis. Could it be someone has obtained the divinity of nature or life? Her expression turned grim. Because if divine enthronement was achieved by obtaining divinity, it would indeed be more convenient, with smaller fluctuations. However, such fortuitous events rarely occurred after the gods' twilight in ancient times. Combining it with recent failed attempts to analyze and glean natural and life divinity from the blood of World Tree, Euler suddenly felt this was highly likely. After all, the World Tree's curse had vanished, and the divine blood crystal seal had been undone. She could secretly study the World Tree's blood, couldn't others do the same? At that instant, Euler thought of Hela again. Because previous signs strongly suggested that the mysterious force hiding in the elf forest was probably related to Hela. Moreover, Hela herself would definitely be interested in the divinity of life. And contemplating that the new god might also be related to Hela worsened Euler's mood. Unfortunately, when your luck's bad, everything bad seems to happen. Just moments ago, she sensed the death of over 300 believers in a matter of minutes. Of course, if it were only about the death of over 300 half-beast believers, it wouldn't have sparked such fury. After all, believers transformed into prayers could provide more faith for the true God. What truly incensed her was the scene seen in the memories of the deceased priest. Figures draped in black robes, cold dark death divine power, and merciless slaughter. She would never mistake it. She absolutely wouldn't mistake it. It was, the favored of the death god and lord of the underworld Hela. And possibly even Hela's personally watched divine favored death god. It truly was the death god. Adding the elf's resurrection to the mix. At that moment, all doubts vanished from Euler's mind. The force residing in the elf forest was definitely Hela's force. And the newly born true god might very well be in the elf forest. Furthermore, the other party was likely a sub-god wielding the power of life cultivated by Hela. Because only through inheriting the divinity of life could it possibly attract the return of those stubborn elves akin to dragons. For a moment, the silver temple on the snowy mountain echoed with Euler's furious roar. Hela! Felenqui! Surrounded by the players, the elves of the Flame tribe finally returned to this once holy city. They gazed upon the ruins of the city before them, their expressions filled with excitement, each one kneeling once again in devout prayer. And natural Saintess Alice, Oak Guardian Bassa, and other players not participating in the mission, upon receiving the news, hurried over to welcome them. Seeing the holy natural Saintess and the Oak Guardian representing the power of the Mother Goddess, the elves of the Flame tribe became even more exhilarated. We're back! We truly are back! Alice was also overjoyed, bowing to all the elves, her voice holy and gentle. Welcome home! After the elves arrived in Felenqui, all the players who took on the mission finally received their rewards. For a moment, seeing the large amounts of experience and contribution points credited to their accounts, all the players looked delighted. At this moment, Alice noticed Meryl among the group. Black Dragon! Her expression revealed astonishment. This is a captive of the Mother Goddess. Elle's expression showed fervor. And the players who hadn't seen a black dragon before were even more excited. Unlike the local natives, they held no fear of the dragon, only curiosity. They surrounded the tightly bound black dragon Meryl, touching, marveling, taking photos, and teasing, nearly driving the pretending to be dead little black dragon to fury. After the Flame tribe elves settled in, they requested Alice to allow them to pilgrimage to the World Tree. Though the World Tree was magnificent, its true form couldn't be seen from Felenqui due to the terrain's obstruction over such a distance. Pilgrimage to the World Tree was the wish of every natural believer. Chapter 99. Alice was delighted to grant the request of the elves. As the natural saintess, the being among the believers closest to the mother goddess, her status was even higher than that of a typical divine favored one. Alice herself was also passionate about spreading the faith. She first shared a hug with Samir, then said to the elves, "May the mother goddess bless you. My dear clan's people, please follow me." As she spoke, Alice drew the symbol of Mother Nature on her chest. Then, she led the elves of the Flame tribe, surrounded by the players, toward the central teleportation array of Felenqui. The core area of the temple in Felenqui had been newly refurbished by the players. When the elves arrived, many players were busy everywhere, completing the daily tasks of architectural repairs. Seeing these busy players, the elves of the Flame tribe felt both astonished and curious. Philosier thought for a moment and finally couldn't resist asking, "Lord Alice, along the way, we received a lot of help from these young clans people, but I noticed they have different hair colors. Just which tribe do they belong to?" Samir had also long been aware of these seemingly always energetic and passionate young clans people. Moreover, he noticed that they seemed to take a keen interest in him and the elves of the Flame tribe. They were very friendly, even excessively so. It felt almost like they were being ingratiating. That reminded him of the crazy things he did in his youth while pursuing a partner. However, Samir did not think these young clans people had any interest in peers or elders. Suddenly, a thought struck him, and he looked up sharply. He looked at Alice, somewhat excitedly. Could it be the chosen ones? Hearing the old priest's words, Alice nodded and smiled, replying, "Yes, Grandpa Samir. They are the brave and diligent chosen ones summoned by the Mother Goddess from another world. To think they are the champions summoned by the Mother Goddess. Does that mean they are primordial elves? Or divine envoys?" The elves of the Flame tribe were all astonished. Philosier was shocked and instinctively looked at Alice. Meeting the gaze of the Flame tribe's clan leader, Alice hesitated for a moment and reluctantly nodded. "Well, sort of. The Mother Goddess had never officially mentioned the true identity of the chosen ones. But since they appear as elves, they should be considered special primordial elves, right?" Alice thought, somewhat conflicted. Seeing the elves' surprised expressions, the players excitedly joined in the fun like lackeys, loudly proclaiming, "That's right, we are the warriors summoned by the goddess. Praise nature! Praise life! Praise the great goddess! We are the chosen ones! We are elves born directly from the world tree, so from now on, we are family. Uncles, aunties, big brothers and big sisters, if you have any quests, just call us. We promise to complete them promptly and properly. Cough cough, we're still young and have a lot to learn, so we'll need to seek your guidance." Hearing the players' words, the elves' gazes toward them changed once again. These chosen ones. They truly were a group of kind-hearted, enthusiastic, humble, respectable, and eager to learn reliable companions. Seeing the elves' moved expressions, Alice hesitated for a moment and carefully reminded. They are indeed very nice people, but sometimes they might do things that are incomprehensible, and at other times, they might have some human-like bad habits. You need to be mentally prepared. Incomprehensible things? Human-like bad habits? Philosier was momentarily stunned. Then, she thought of the chosen ones charging fearlessly and ruthlessly hunting the half-beasts, and their greedy scavenging for equipment after slaying them, not to mention their eyes lighting up at the sight of ancient texts. At that moment, she suddenly understood. So that's how it is. However, even with those shortcomings, Philosier still felt deeply grateful to the chosen ones. Thinking of the young chosen ones who had fallen in battle, she said with a pained expression. "Alas, they really sacrificed many companions to rescue us this time. Nearly 100 young lives were lost." Sacrificed companions? Hearing Philosier's words, Alice and the others had strange expressions. Berserker, who had shrunk to 4 meters, glanced at the players. The players averted their eyes, smiling awkwardly. "Berserker. Heh. He let out a cold chuckle and said in a deep voice. "You don't need to worry. They are immortal." Immortal? Philosier and the others looked stunned. Even Samir wore an expression of disbelief. Immortal, what does that mean? Before they could ask for clarity, the teleportation array in the center of the square suddenly lit up brilliantly, and dozens of tall figures appeared before everyone. They wore simple wooden armor and linen robes, their expressions excited. Hurry, hurry. I heard they've arrived. And they've even captured a dragon. Cough cough, I wonder what expression the NPCs will have when they see us. Don't mention it, Dima, your act was so convincing just now, all melodramatic, a real drama king. I wonder how you'll handle it when we meet them. Listening to the teasing of his companions, Dima placed his hands on his hips and boasted proudly. Ha ha, it's all for the sake of improving rapport. These new NPCs are elves too. I bet they're as straightforward as Alice and the others, raising rapport will be so quick. Once the rapport is high, we can have anything we want. Dismay, dislike, neutral, like, intimate. These different levels of rapport make a huge difference. I'm telling you, the reason I can team up with El to hunt monsters is simply because my rapport with him is intimate. Then, he realized his companions were all silent. Why aren't you guys saying anything? Did I say something wrong? He muttered curiously, noticing the others were desperately signaling with their eyes. Dima subconsciously followed their gaze. In front of him were all the NPCs standing. Dima. Ding, your rapport with Berserker has decreased by 20 points, reaching dismay. Ding, your rapport with Alicewind has decreased by 20 points, maintaining dismay. Ding, your rapport with Samirwind has decreased by 20 points, reaching neutral. Ding, your rapport with Phil Flame has decreased by 20 points, reaching neutral. Ding, your rapport with El Moonlight has decreased by 20 points, reaching like. Dima. Big brother Dima. El looked at him, his expression complex. I didn't realize that's how you felt. Dima's smile vanished once more. Chapter 100. The Chosen One could actually evade death. When the young elves who had been witnessed falling in battle reappeared exuberantly before them, the expressions of the elves from the Flame tribe were quite something to behold. However, rather than anger over being deceived, they felt more relieved. Just like Alice had said, even if these Chosen Ones had some bad habits, it didn't stop the Flame tribe elves from feeling grateful to them. Perhaps the initial impression the players left on the elves was just too good. Yet despite this, those players who had once put on tragic performances still received notifications of varying degrees of favorability decrease. Especially Dimasha, who courted death in person. Seeing his favor drop from intimate to fondness with El, his face turned green and he hurriedly followed behind the little boy, constantly apologizing and trying to make amends. Afterwards, the elves arrived at the square of Elf Town through the teleportation array. As the scenery before their eyes changed and they took in the lush, exotic vibe of the Elf Town, all the native elves couldn't help but gasp in amazement. What a beautiful little town! I've never seen architecture like this before. It's somewhat similar to humans, but it feels more refined and closer to nature. Those wooden lofts and terraces are delightful. And the gardens composed of stones and ponds have an indescribable charm. Every elf was a natural-born artist. And the meticulously crafted elf town by the players was undoubtedly an eye-opener for them. Especially after Eve moved beyond her near-death state, the wooden structures in the town regained vitality, giving them a fairy-tale-like look of plant houses while maintaining the original architecture's style and charm. This aligned perfectly with the elves' aesthetics. Hearing the elves' admiration, Alice explained. This is Elf Town, or rather, the Chosen City. It was built by all the Chosen Ones themselves. It's also the home of the Chosen Ones. After speaking, she pointed to the steel in the center of the square. Do you see? Carved on that steel are the names of all the Chosen Ones who participated in building the town, though, it's inscribed in a mysterious script only the Chosen Ones understand. The town was built by the Chosen Ones? The elves listened, their expressions filled with surprise. They glanced at the players moving about in the town and gathering towards them, their gazes changing once again. Phil drew a symbol of Mother Nature across his chest and praised. It seems, they're not just brave warriors but also noble artists. Samir pondered for a moment, his expression suddenly becoming astonished. Wait. Alice, you said the town was built by the Chosen Ones. Does that mean, they constructed such a scaled town in just a few months? Alice glanced at the players and nodded. That's right. Upon receiving confirmation, the elves from the Flame tribe expressed astonishment once again. With magic's presence, building a city wasn't difficult for the elves. However, constructing a town that was an artistic masterpiece in various styles was indeed challenging. Meanwhile, they were once more awed by the wisdom of the Mother Goddess. Only a true god could receive allegiance from such brave warriors, right? A sanctuary. This is the new sanctuary of the Mother Goddess," an elderly elf exclaimed excitedly. As the elves raised their heads and saw the majestic world tree, their expressions grew even more enthusiastic. Especially the elders. Unlike the young elves who had never seen the world tree, these elders had witnessed its true form once, though back then, it had been withered and dying. But now, the world tree was full of life. Its green leaves covered the branches, exuding vitality. Even standing in the square, the elves could feel the vibrant life energy emanating from the world tree along with its subtle divine aura. Their faces were filled with reverent fervor as they knelt down. Praise nature! Praise life! Praise the great elven sovereign! Mother Goddess, we have returned. As they worshipped, the world tree also emitted a faint halo. Particles of green light floated out, turning the square into a verdant sea once again. At the same time, a gentle and ethereal hymn was faintly heard, and all the elves felt a serene calm wash over them, relaxing their minds and bodies like never before. Welcome home! In their consciousness, a solemn yet kind female voice appeared. In an instant, all the elves lowered their heads once more, full of reverent excitement. Then, the voice of the goddess resonated again in their hearts. Flame tribe, settle in Felenqui, and rebuild the city with the chosen ones. Hearing the sacred and authoritative oracle, all the flame tribe elves fervently and respectfully responded. We heed the Mother Goddess's decree. The elves of the flame tribe, after worshipping the world tree, returned to Felenqui. From now on, Felenqui would be their new home. However, the captured black dragon Meryl was left behind. This little black dragon was dazed the moment it was teleported to Elf Town. Tree, such a tall, big tree. Due to some special reasons, its dragon heritage in its mind wasn't complete, so the little one didn't immediately recognize the gigantic tree in front of it as the legendary world tree. However, it sensed from the entity a daunting and terrifying pressure. Dragons were very sensitive to auras. In just a moment, Meryl realized that it was a terribly strong creature reaching the level of a true god. Ancient, it's definitely an ancient god. It shivered, recalling the majestic voice it heard. Ancient gods. They were rarer and more terrifying than the true gods of faith. Good heavens! Was there still an awakened ancient god in the Segis world? As Meryl was shaken to its core, the divine robe binding it disappeared. Then, that terrifying voice appeared in its mind once more. I'm giving you a choice, submit to me. Meryl was speechless. One choice, was that even a choice? Meryl's black dragon face turned green. It was Meryl, a noble dragon, the longest-lived golden race. Not even an ancient god could make it submit. This was the pride of a dragon. The black dragon proudly lifted its head and shouted in a sad, young voice. A dragon, will never be a slave. I'd rather die than submit to you. After speaking, Meryl noticed the other side fell silent. Meryl suddenly had a bad feeling. A moment later, it heard the nerve-wracking voice in its mind again, with a hint of amusement. All right. Since you don't want to submit, then die. The black dragon's entire body is full of treasures. Its scales can be made into armor, its dragon blood can create arrays and runes, can also cultivate dragon blood warriors, dragon meat is the finest cuisine, which can enhance worldly creatures' physique. As for the dragon heart and dragon crystal, they're even more useful. Even the dragon soul, can be forged into the soul of a bone dragon undead, it combines perfectly with the dragon bone. Come to think of it, even a corpse is quite valuable. Meryl was speechless. Evil god. It was undoubtedly an evil god. The little black dragon shivered, tears welling up in its eyes. I'll submit. Its voice was filled with grievance. Chapter 101. After the black dragon Meryl submitted, Eve used the method inherited from the world tree to leave a master-servant mark on its soul. The mark of a true god was incredibly firm. Unless someone could kill Eve or a stronger entity intervened, this little black dragon wasn't going anywhere in its lifetime. Meryl could only accept it dispiritedly. However, despite this, Eve could clearly feel that the little black dragon was not convinced. But she wasn't worried. There was plenty of time, and if this silly black dragon could even fool the half-beasts, wouldn't Eve be able to fool it too? Afterwards, Eve allowed Meryl to move freely. The condition was that it couldn't leave a radius of 3 kilometers around the elf town and could not harm the elves and chosen ones. Meryl could only put on a gloomy dragon face and find a hill next to the elf town to dig a hole and build a nest. Ah, my castle! Ah, my gold coins and gemstones! Ah, my unfinished righteous cause. The little black dragon muttered gloomily while building its nest. It was truly aggrieved. Black dragons like to live in swamps and the ruins of civilization, but there were no such places around the world tree. Felinqui was decent, but it was a bit far from Eve's main body. Moreover, because a black dragon participated in the divine war 1,000 years ago, and the roots of the world tree were gnawed by an ancient black dragon, leading directly to the decline of the previous world tree, the native elves were full of hostility and vigilance towards black dragons. Therefore, before completely subduing this little one, Eve planned to keep it under her watch. Of course, another reason was that she was too lazy to personally train this little one, intending to leave the task of persuading the black dragon to the players. The personality of a dragon was as stubborn as a mule on Blue Star, especially since Eve had directly subdued Meryl with strength. If it were an ordinary black dragon, that would be one thing. They revered the strong and would submit obediently when faced with overwhelming power. But once the strength suppressing them weakened, black dragons would find ways to rebel. Therefore, gaining a black dragon's loyalty was almost impossible. But the mental workings of this black dragon seemed to be different from ordinary ones. It seemed very innocent, even thinking it was a silver dragon. In this situation, Eve thought she should have a chance to truly win over the little black dragon's heart. However, to truly win its heart, it seemed she would need to put in some effort. The initial work of persuasion, Eve planned to leave to others to handle. Thus, she issued a new task: tame the black dragon. Task: tame the black dragon. Task content: the black dragon Meryl became a captive of the goddess in battle and submitted to her. However, in its heart, it did not truly accept the ideology of the goddess. As a loyal follower of the goddess, you decide to assist the goddess in fully taming black dragon Meryl. Task objective: make black dragon Meryl truly recognize the goddess, accept her faith, and fight for her. Task duration: no limit. Task level: no limit. Task reward: 3,000 contribution points. Of course, this task was not part of the main storyline, and taking it on was optional. But when the players saw this task, they were all intrigued. It wasn't just the high contribution point reward of 3,000, they also saw it as an opportunity to get close to the black dragon. If they helped the goddess tame the black dragon, wouldn't that mean they might have a chance to get in the good graces of the black dragon? If luck was on their side, perhaps they could even become a dragon knight. How cool would that be? Remember, Demasha managed to team up with El and go out into the wilds because of his close bond with him. Though it was rumored he seemed to have messed up. But this black dragon was genuinely at the level of silver upper. Many players were tempted for a while and accepted the task. However, Meryl was not impressed by the players and was rather hostile. The players who approached it either got sprayed with saliva, kicked away, or trembled uncontrollably under the pressure of its dragon presence. In short, its expression conveyed, "I'm annoyed and strong, you bastards better not bother me." Gradually, as some players' initial excitement waned, they gave up. Only a few players continued to persist. Little Xian Miao was one of them. However, no matter how she tried to be friendly, Meryl remained indifferent towards her. Even when she brought some skewers of grilled meat from two northeastern guys selling barbecue in the town, it didn't impress Meryl. Not only that, but the little black dragon also slapped the skewers onto the ground, stomped on them, and spat on them to express its anger. Dragons do not eat food that comes from charity. Being friendly didn't work, feeding it didn't work, and fewer players were persistent. After all, instead of wasting time with the black dragon, they could be completing daily tasks or hunting monsters. For regular players, time meant experience points and contribution points. Gradually, only the semi-casual player Little Xian Miao was left. She didn't care about the task rewards, she was purely interested in the black dragon. But despite this interest, the black dragon wasn't buying it. Nevertheless, Little Xian Miao was quite stubborn, and Meryl's resistance only fueled her determination. She decided that no matter what, she would complete this task. After more than half a day had passed, the black dragon Meryl began to grow a bit anxious and restless. To Little Xian Miao's surprise, it suddenly flapped its wings and flew up. Meryl flew into the air, circled the town and its surroundings several times, and intermittently surveyed the area as if searching for something. When it returned, its whole face fell. This appearance puzzled Little Xian Miao. At that moment, she suddenly heard a deep rumbling sound emanating from within the black dragon. To be more precise, it seemed to be from its abdomen. Her expression turned peculiar instantaneously. This guy, could it be hungry? Well, there really wasn't much edible within that 3-kilometer radius, the players had pretty much ravaged everything edible. Except for some fruit. And black dragons, are carnivorous. Noticing her strange gaze, Meryl became furious. Scram! Evil creature! Stop lingering in front of Lord Meryl. Or else Lord Meryl will definitely eat you. The dragon's sudden outburst startled little Xian Miao. A thought struck her, and she pretended to leave but secretly hid to observe. After little Xian Miao left, Meryl looked around as if checking whether anyone was nearby. Ensuring no one was around, it looked at the dusty and saliva-covered meat skewers on the ground, its expression turning conflicted. After a moment, she saw it swallow. Gilyalu! Another loud rumble sounded. After hesitating for a moment, Meryl quickly lowered its head and gobbled up the dusty skewers. Afterwards, it smacked its lips as if savoring the taste. Little Xian Miao! She covered her mouth to stifle a laugh and started typing in the World Channel. Buying demon beast meat at high prices, as much as you have, I'll buy. Meanwhile, she contacted the 2 northeastern guys who could grill meat. Chapter 102. Meryl was very conflicted. The despicable evil god had confined her activities to a 3-kilometer radius. But after inspecting the area, she realized that there was no food here at all. Oh heavens! Is the great Lord Meryl going to starve to death here? She was an adolescent dragon, right in the growth phase, and naturally had a huge appetite. The sensation of hunger was something she had rarely experienced ever since settling in her castle in the dark mountain range. At that time, the half-beast tribe would prepare everything she needed. Thinking of those honest and capable half-beasts, and then about these cruel, crazy long-eared creatures, Meryl felt her future growing increasingly bleak. Do I really have to surrender to those long ears? Recalling the taste of the meat skewer she had just smelled, Meryl involuntarily swallowed her saliva but quickly shook her head. No. No. How can Meryl bow to evil forces? She seemed to have forgotten. She had already bowed twice before. Just then, an even more alluring aroma of meat wafted over. Meryl sniffed the air, suddenly feeling her hunger intensify as dragon saliva uncontrollably pooled beneath her. Slurp, so fragrant. Her body moved instinctively, heading in the direction of the aroma. Crossing a small hill, Meryl quickly found the source of the fragrance on the edge of the town. It was little Xian Miao. She was grilling meat with 2 male elves over a campfire, the meat sizzled with oil above the flames and was sprinkled with unnamed spices and honey, its enticing aroma spreading from far away. Beside them, demon beast meat was piled like a small mountain. Seeing the sudden appearance of the enormous dragon head, with its pair of shiny dragon eyes staring straight ahead despite seemingly forcing themselves not to look over here, and its conflicted little expression, little Xian Miao's eyes formed into crescents of amusement. She took a skewer of perfectly grilled meat from the campfire, brought it to her mouth, and took a bite. The fragrance of the meat burst forth. The salty, savory, and tender meat texture was delicious, the charred and shiny fat melted in her mouth, and the mouth-watering flavors made her eyes light up slightly. The handiwork of her Northeast pals was indeed powerful. Seeing her enjoying the food so much, Meryl's eyes lit up slightly as she drooled even more. Little Xian Miao glanced at her, and she immediately retracted her expression. Meryl lifted her dragon head proudly, puffing up her dragon snout petulantly, and exhaled heavily, but her eyes couldn't help but glance over furtively, much like a large husky. Seeing her like this, little Xian Miao gave a friendly smile. She picked up a large skewer made of branches from the campfire, sniffed it at her nose. It smelled really good. She made a blissful expression, then lifted the meat skewer, enticing little black dragon. Want some? Meryl. Little black dragon's expression grew even more conflicted. Gilyalu. Another loud rumble came from her stomach. Meryl. She took a deep breath, trying to hypnotize herself inside. This isn't submission. It's temporary hibernation. This isn't acceptance, but a way to gather strength for freedom later. Then, she woodenly walked to little Xian Miao's side and snatched the meat skewer with her mouth. Crunch crunch. Juices and oils sprayed everywhere, the chewy meat tendons and crispy, tender flesh perfectly blended together, the salty and savory flavors rapidly spreading in her mouth. It was, truly delicious. Meryl's dragon eyes widened to their largest size. After eating, she licked her lips wistfully. She had to admit, this was the best food she had ever tasted. Perhaps it was because she was starved, but Meryl even thought it was tastier than human food. Human cuisine was famously known in the Segis world, and Meryl's adoptive father was also a noble dragon who adored human food, but even when she was with her father, she hadn't tasted such delicious grilled meat. Seeing the sparkle in Meryl's eyes, little Xian Miao's eyes were filled with smiles. Don't worry, there's plenty more, but it needs to roast a bit longer. After saying this, a thought occurred to little Xian Miao, and she continued. So, while it's roasting, would you like to hear a story? A story? Meryl was a bit startled. She glanced at the evil, long-eared creature with a proud expression but grew curious on her lips. What kind of story? Little Xian Miao's mouth turned up slightly. A story about a kind race that loves peace. A kind race? Meryl furrowed her brow, her heart sneering silently. Kindness? Haha. Did evil races even know what kindness was? Humph, I'll give you a chance, Lord Meryl. She coolly said this. Fine. Since she had eaten someone else's food, she would listen to what this evil creature had to say. Perhaps she still had a hint of conscience, and if Lord Meryl could recruit her as a clansman and guide her onto a path of righteousness, it might not be a bad choice. After all, the grilled meat was quite delicious. Lord Meryl certainly wasn't doing it just for the grilled meat. Watching Meryl, who was becoming increasingly without limits because of little Xian Miao's temptation, Eve was very satisfied. Seems like this dragon who thinks she's a silver dragon is about to be completely conquered. She chuckled, then focused her attention on her true form. Now that the Flame Tribe elves had returned, and the number of players was growing, someone would eventually notice the significant changes in the elf forest. Although she had shifted the blame to Hela again, Euler wouldn't just let it go. After all, this place wasn't the Netherworld. However, Euler's next move would undoubtedly be even more cautious. Perhaps, she might even send a divine favored to investigate personally. As her strength increased, the barrier for concealment Eve had set up for herself had expanded to 30 kilometers. That meant, beyond 30 kilometers, what others saw of the World Tree was different from what they saw within 30 kilometers. Nonetheless, if an enemy managed to sneak in carefully, they might indeed discover the World Tree's revival. However, since embodying the divine country, Eve felt her control over her true form became even more precise. So, she decided to further perfect this concealment. Setting up an illusion within a certain range isn't as good as applying it directly onto my body. I can directly exert power onto my true form to conceal my own changes, only allowing my believers and the working players to see my true form. With this setup, even if enemies managed to sneak in, as long as they didn't come into contact with my true form, they wouldn't notice any changes. They would still see the withered world tree. And players and believers already know they need to conceal my revival from the outside world, so even if someone sneaks in, I can notify them to respond immediately. Maybe I could even use this to mislead them. Previously, Eve didn't have precise control over divine power, and her connections with believers and players were rough. But after embodying the divine country, all of this had become possible. With these thoughts in mind, she quickly constructed a new concealment barrier around her true form. At the same time, the NPC task system she had already planned could be prioritized with the increase in native elves and the further strengthening of the faith channel. Chapter 103. The NPC task system was something Eve had considered for a long time. As it stood, the game tasks in Elf Kingdom were primarily issued and settled by Eve herself. Even the daily tasks granted by Alice were supported behind the scenes by Eve. Though she had been reborn as the World Tree, this level of computation was as simple as eating and drinking water in her past life, but that was because there were still very few players. 2 closed beta tests were enough. For the next recruitment, Eve planned to officially commence the open beta. By then, there would be a massive influx of players, reaching tens of thousands. And as the number of players increased, it would be impossible for Eve to manage everything personally. Many things could be delegated to the native elves. Eve's plan was to connect the game system she designed with her faith channel, delegating part of the game management authority to her believers, truly incorporating them as NPCs in the game. This was the NPC task system. Specifically, it entailed distributing a portion of game permissions to her believers based on the level of their faith, creating NPC templates that allowed them the autonomy to issue tasks to players and distribute rewards. This was somewhat like turning Elf Kingdom into a corporation. Eve was the boss, her believers were the employees, and the players were their clients and cash cows. The higher the faith level in Eve, the greater the task NPC authority of the believers. In Eve's plan, saints were to be granted a purple NPC template, fanatics a blue NPC template, and devout believers a white NPC template. Those who offered minimal faith wouldn't be integrated into the system. If they wanted the ability to issue tasks to the chosen ones, they needed to praise the goddess and become devout believers as soon as possible. As for the sole golden NPC, that would be Eve herself. The content of the tasks was to be set by the believers themselves. The content could benefit the believers, but it must not harm and should even aid the mother goddess's interests, and serve as a positive feedback mechanism for the development of the elf civilization. Of course, Eve would encourage believers to issue tasks that benefited her. If a believer issued a task that made an outstanding contribution to her and civilization, Eve would reward the believer. Given the nature of the elves in Segis world, Eve wasn't concerned about anyone causing trouble in this regard. The rewards could be provided by the believers themselves, or they could be the experience points and contribution points allocated by Eve to them, and even the learning of certain skills and career changes. Of course, the skills and job changes issued by NPCs were different from the direct infusion in the contribution mall. The skills and career changes obtained from NPCs required players to learn from scratch like the native elves. This was considered another path for civilian players. After all, not everyone had the money to throw around for contribution points. Out of over 1,000 people, only one was like little Xian Miao who treated money like paper. The transcendent status of the contribution mall wouldn't change. In addition, the experience points and contribution point quotas held by believers would also be linked to their level of faith. The more devout the faith in Eve, the larger the allocated quota, and the greater the one-time distribution. The quota would refresh every 24 hours and could not be accumulated. Of course, the reward quota allocated to NPCs had to be below that of the main storyline. The richest and most unique rewards had to be held in Eve's own hands. However, daily tasks weren't subject to restrictions. Daily tasks could be repeatedly accepted. Generally speaking, the daily tasks in each period were Eve's development plans for that period. For instance, the current daily tasks were the expansion of Elf Town and the restoration of the holy city of Felenqui. And for daily tasks, Eve would specially design a silver daily task NPC template that could be compatible with the ordinary NPC template. For example, Saintess Alice could have both the daily task NPC template and the purple NPC template simultaneously. This meant that while issuing unrestricted daily tasks, she could also distribute NPC tasks according to her own preferences to the players. Once this system was activated, the gameplay of the entire game would become more diverse. At the same time, Eve would be somewhat relieved of issuing tasks, only needing to oversee the backstage system operation and main storyline. And for the believers, it would once again ignite their enthusiasm for faith and deepen their interactions with the players. Eve could already vaguely foresee that all players would turn into the loyal dog fans of the elves, especially those devout elves. Moreover, Eve also planned to evaluate the performance of all believers' tasks every few months or a year. Those believers who made significant contributions to the development of civilization, the spread of faith, or the enhancement of Eve's power would be richly rewarded. This was meant to ignite the enthusiasm of the believers and guide the direction of their task distribution. Ah, she was just too clever. Eve was very pleased. These plans, she had thought of them long ago. However, before transforming into the divine country, Eve's grasp of faith was still rough and couldn't connect the two systems well. But now she could. Thinking of this, Eve quickly began the necessary preparations to formally establish the NPC task system. On the outskirts of Elf Town, Black Dragon Meryl gnawed on roasted meat, sniffling. It's so tragic. The elf clan is so tragic. I've heard of the famous elf clan but never seen this beautiful race. Never thought peace-loving they would be so tragic. Just now, little Xian Miao narrated the history of the elves over the past 1,000 years to Meryl in story form. To make it more sentimental, little Xian Miao searched online for tragic stories from Blue Star, purposely chose the sorrowful ones, embellishing them into a modified elf version. Considering that this black dragon had been misled by the half-beast before, she didn't directly mention that the ones persecuting the elves were the half-beast and humans, nor did she describe what an elf looked like. This black dragon with incomplete inheritance didn't even know that the ones who captured him were elves. The final outcome was that Meryl was completely immersed in the story. So, the evil forces must be eliminated. Ah, I don't know where the elves are now. If Meryl knew where they were, Meryl would surely help them. Meryl spoke earnestly while eating the roasted meat. Upon hearing it, Little Xian Miao smiled slightly. She pointed at several flame tribe elves visiting Elf Town in the distance, and said, "They are elves." Then she pointed at herself. "I am counted as a special elf too." At that moment, Meryl's eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible." He spat out the roasted meat in his mouth instantly, his dragon aura flared in anger, and he roared furiously. "You evil long-ears, you are lying to me." Little Xian Miao jumped in fright. However, she still mustered the courage to say a few words. "Your notions are merely instilled by the half-beast. What I haven't told you is that the race persecuting the elves in the story was the half-beast. You can find out these matters with slight inquiries in human society. The previous coercion by the half-beast was just trying to capture elves to sell them as slaves to humans. As for us, we are merely resisting." Listening to little Xian Miao, Meryl was dumbfounded. He glanced at the peaceful and lively atmosphere in the distant town, his expression gradually turning bewildered. Little Xian Miao wanted to say more, but her thoughts were interrupted by a system notification that suddenly appeared in her view. Announcement: Elf Kingdom will undergo a version update at Blue Star's next day midnight. Please prepare for logging out in advance. Version update? Little Xian Miao was quite curious. She checked the time, hesitated for a moment, and said to Meryl, "Think about it carefully yourself. I'm leaving now." With that, she got up and left, leaving Black Dragon alone in a daze. Chapter 104. Carlos Flame was over 900 years old. If one did not become a legend, an elf's lifespan was about 1200 years, and adulthood was at 200 years. Though the youth of elves lasted long, and they aged very slowly, only gradually showing signs of aging after 800 or 900 years. Yet, translated to human terms, Carlos was already equivalent to an elderly person in their 50s or 60s. Carlos often listened to the thousand-year-old elders in the tribe talk about the prosperity of the elf kingdom. Unfortunately, since he could remember, all he had experienced were leaving home, hiding, and wandering. After the world tree fell, the elf clan had persisted for several hundred years. But as other races pressed in step by step, in the end, they had no choice but to leave one after another. It had been 700 years since the Flame tribe left the elf forest. To be able to return here, to see the revived world tree, it all felt like a dream to him. But in reality, they truly had returned and settled in the holy city of Felenqui. The elf forest was just as bountiful as in his memories. Or should he say, with the revival of the mother goddess, it was even more bountiful. Except for the slightly fewer animals around Felenqui than Carlos had imagined, the place was so rich in resources they didn't even need to worry about food. Because just walking through the forest, you could find countless berries. And if you knew some natural magic, you could even make some plants in the forest ripen. The magic power in the elf forest was quite abundant, and many fruits could easily be ripened, consuming only a tiny bit of guiding magic power. If there were a berry-producing plant in the yard, the elves didn't even need to leave home. If they were hungry, they just needed to ripen the plant. Such a life, Carlos could not have imagined before. Because he was born after the mother goddess had fallen, and the elf forest had long lost its former glory. At this moment, he understood why those older elves were so nostalgic about the past, why they referred to the elf forest as the elves' earthly heaven. The elf forest, after the revival of the mother goddess, was indeed like heaven. At the same time, it allowed Carlos to vaguely imagine how powerful the elf kingdom was 1,000 years ago. And Carlos knew they were able to return because they had regained the protection of the mother goddess. The protection of the true god was the greatest reliance for the intelligent races of the Segis world. At that moment, Carlos's faith in nature deepened. He had finally grown from a shallow believer into a truly devout believer. If we want to continue living here, if we want the elf clan to rise again, we must strengthen our race and the power of the mother goddess. Carlos decided that he would dedicate the remaining 300 years of his life to the mother goddess and the future of the elf clan. And after thinking it over, he planned to open a small forging shop in Felenqui. He had already inherited his father's forging skills and was a skilled forging master, experienced in creating magic tools and equipment, with most of the Flame tribe's equipment made by him. However, the wandering over the past few centuries had caused him to gradually loosen his skills. But after arriving in the elf forest, he intended to pick up these techniques again. The development of intelligent races was inseparable from tools, and weapons and equipment were even more needed in battle. Through Carlos's observation, he found that although most of the numerous chosen ones had equipment, and some of it was quite lavish, their maintenance was poor. Not only that, many people's weapons and equipment were damaged, and they seemed to have never considered repairing them. Of course, he didn't know this was because the players' battles were too frequent, and equipment damage was common. And it wasn't that the players hadn't considered repairs, but that they simply couldn't repair things themselves. The contribution store could repair equipment, but the cost seemed too painful, nearly as much as redeeming a new set. So, many people ultimately chose to offer their broken equipment to the goddess in secret and use contribution points to exchange for new ones. As a result, the players Carlos saw were all using equipment that hadn't been maintained or repaired. And as Carlos planned to reopen a forging shop, he faced another headache. Because there were really too few people in the Flame tribe, and everyone was busy just settling into the elf forest. He found himself unable to find any apprentices to help him in a short amount of time. That's when Carlos thought of the chosen ones. But a trace of doubt crept into his heart. Lord Alice once mentioned that I could ask those chosen ones for help, but, would they be willing to be apprentices? To Carlos, the chosen ones, summoned personally by the Mother Goddess, held a status akin to divine envoys. But being an apprentice in a forging shop was dirty and tiring work, and he wasn't seeking profit. As an apprentice, aside from learning some forging skills, there were no benefits. The chosen ones were so capable, they could even build miraculous cities like the Chosen City. In this situation, would they be willing to come? He hesitated all day, unable to make up his mind, until he fell asleep that night. At night, Carlos had a dream. In his dream, he saw the gracious and generous Mother Goddess. The Mother Goddess praised his faith and granted him the ability to assign tasks to the chosen ones. Invoke my name in your heart, and you shall access the relevant permissions. The Mother Goddess advised in the dream. When he woke up the next day, Carlos felt dazed. He thought he had just been thinking too much during the day, causing him to have such a strange dream. He chuckled, getting ready to rise when he suddenly stopped. Mother Goddess. He pondered for a moment and, with the mindset of trying it out, sincerely called out in his heart. Praise nature, praise life, praise the great elf sovereign Yggdrasil. With a tremor in his heart, Carlos was shocked to find that his vision had changed. A semi-transparent white box appeared before his eyes, with the words Task Management Permissions written in elven script. By the Mother Goddess. This is not a dream. He gasped, drawing a symbol of Mother Nature on his chest. And after some study, he discovered this task management permissions was, indeed, the ability to assign tasks. Moreover, this strange ability could be controlled solely with his mind and could disappear at will, reappearing when called upon. The permissions included functions he had never heard of, like task setting and reward setting, along with a user manual. After reading the manual, Carlos more or less understood these abilities. This truly is an ability to assign tasks to the chosen ones. And all the functions are targeted at the chosen ones. Carlos was in awe. The power of the true God. This is the power of the true God. The Mother Goddess was truly generous, bestowing the believers with such powerful abilities. Upon further understanding the rules, Carlos realized the Mother Goddess's true intention was to have the chosen ones assist them in revitalizing the race and increasing the power of the Mother Goddess. Of course, believers could also use this to have the chosen ones help them with certain tasks. And those strange rewards called experience points and contribution points were all directed at the chosen ones. The manual's introduction said those rewards were what the chosen ones desperately sought, and believers could use them as an exchange to ask for their help. Carlos was thrilled. He suddenly wanted to give it a try. These rewards might be able to help me find one apprentice. His eyes glowed. Chapter 105. Carlos had made up his mind he planned to immediately head to the chosen city to recruit the chosen ones. However, when he emerged from the makeshift wooden hut, he found that Felenqui was already bustling with activity. For some reason, Felenqui had been flooded with a large number of young chosen ones, packed densely together. As far as his eyes could see, the core area of the repaired temple was filled with heads of people. Carlos opened his mouth in surprise, wondering what was going on. Although Felenqui usually had its fair share of chosen ones, at those times they were only there to help the elves with repairs in the holy city, but today, Carlos seriously doubted if every single chosen one had come to Felenqui. Not only that, but the behavior of the chosen ones was also very strange. Every time they saw an elf from the Flame tribe, they would enthusiastically gather around. Especially around the older elves, there were several chosen ones gathered around each one. They smiled and continuously tried to ingratiate themselves, scaring the old elves. Old priest Samir, who was stationed at the Felenqui temple, was even more overwhelmed. Surrounded by a crowd of chosen ones, his angry scoldings fell on deaf ears, and the people only increased. Not only that, Carlos even heard the chosen ones exclaiming in the distance. "Whoa! A blue NPC! It's a rare NPC! Quick, get over here! Priest Grandpa! Please help us out!" Carlos took a deep breath, having no idea what kind of madness had overtaken these young warriors. And just as he stepped out, more than a dozen chosen ones brightened upon seeing him. "Another one! It's white!" They lit up with excitement as if they had spotted prey, swarming around Carlos and surrounding him completely. At the same time, Carlos heard their expectant and excited voices. "Dear Elf Grandpa, good morning. Sir, do you have any tasks we can help with? Do you have any skills we could learn? I'm very eager and already at level 15. Strong and sturdy. I can do anything." Carlos. Looking at the expectant chosen ones, Carlos was bewildered. What was going on? But soon, a thought struck him as he remembered last night's dream. Could it be? Was this the will of the Mother Goddess? Suddenly, he felt a surge of joy. This was an opportunity. It seemed, he might actually recruit some apprentices. But he glanced at the chosen ones and felt a bit apprehensive. He wondered if the chosen ones would be able to endure the tedium of being a forge apprentice. He knew that working as an apprentice in the forge was not only tedious but also carried poor conditions, and was very exhausting. They often worked shirtless, drenched in sweat, all day long. And more importantly, Carlos couldn't offer much in the way of wages. After pondering for a moment, he decided to test the ability granted to him by the Mother Goddess. He cleared his throat and, with a mix of anticipation and apprehension, said, Yes, I do need some help. I'm planning to open a forge shop in Felenqui to manufacture and repair equipment and magic items. But right now I'm short-staffed. I need to recruit apprentices. However, the work will be very tiring, and I can offer very, very little in terms of compensation." His voice trailed off, sounding a bit embarrassed. As soon as Carlos finished, the chosen ones surrounding him saw a new hint message in their interfaces. "Carlos Flame has issued a quest, recruiting forge apprentices." In an instant, the players fell silent. Seeing the quiet of the chosen ones, Carlos felt a jolt in his heart, wondering if his demands had let the chosen ones down. But before he could say anything else, the players erupted. "Forge skills? Recruiting apprentices? It's a life skills NPC. What luck! Can repair equipment? Sir, I want to learn. I want to be an apprentice!" They exclaimed excitedly, completely surrounding Carlos. Their determined expression made Carlos shiver subconsciously and suddenly question if the Mother Goddess's warriors had a different motive. No, there were a few women as well. Wait. Even women wanted to be forge apprentices? Carlos was dumbfounded. Before he could react, the chosen one stuffed his hands full of berries and sat him down on a stone bench. Meanwhile, someone began to fan him with leaves and massage his legs and shoulders. And their flattering voices began to ring out. "Elf Grandpa, you look like such a good person. These berries are for you. They're really sweet. I admire the forging profession the most, so, could you take me on?" "Old Grandpa, no, dear sir. I'm very strong, please take me on as an apprentice. Let me massage your shoulders. And me. I've already started learning elf language, and I'm very interested in magic item manufacturing." Carlos. Looking at the enthusiastic chosen ones, Carlos was stunned. Did they really like being apprentices this much? He felt like happiness had come so suddenly, it was a bit unreal. Taking a deep breath, he added. "But, I'm afraid I can't offer much in terms of compensation." He didn't even get to finish before the players' voices overwhelmed him. "No need. No need. I don't want any rewards, just teach me the skills of forging." "Me too. Me too. As long as you teach me how to repair equipment, that's enough." Carlos. He looked at the chosen ones with excitement and felt deeply moved. Good people. These guys are really good people. Taking a deep breath, he said. "All right. Since you're all willing, welcome to become my apprentices." After speaking, he sighed. "It's just that, because of my limited energy, I can only take up to 5 people. So, those who are interested, stay and help me build the forge shop. I will choose 5 from among you to become apprentices during this process. At this moment, Carlos felt incredibly happy. He never expected that his problem wasn't having no apprentices, but having too many who wanted to be apprentices. After hearing his words, the players looked at each other and decided to stay. Under Carlos's direction, they began the work of building the forge shop. Not only that, but more players continued to arrive from afar, eagerly joining them. Looking at the enthusiastic chosen ones, Carlos was filled with emotion. It's so wonderful. I haven't seen days like these in hundreds of years. Back when I was an apprentice, we elves still had a large forging workshop, but unfortunately, alas. As he spoke, he shook his head and sighed. I can only take 5 apprentices, not just because of my limited energy, but mainly due to the lack of equipment. Hey, the equipment for forging is all specialized, and though I've brought some back, it's still not enough. A lot of it we'll have to make ourselves. But for now, conditions are too poor, and what we make just doesn't meet the standards. I really miss the old workshop. After hearing Carlos's words, one player stopped and curiously asked. Wasn't there a workshop in Felenqui before? Maybe, we could look for any remaining equipment. Hearing this, Carlos regretfully shook his head. The equipment from the Holy City was moved during the migration long ago. However, after saying this, he seemed to remember something and added uncertainly. But in Rivendell, there might still be some. It was the largest manufacturing city of the elf clan, and since it was among the first to be hit by war, many things may not have been moved. After speaking, he shook his head once more. But it's been 1,000 years, and even if any are left, I guess they wouldn't be usable. As soon as he finished, Carlos found the chosen ones were all quiet. Perplexed, he turned to find everyone looking at him excitedly. What's going on? He asked curiously. Rivendell. The players were instantly excited. P.S. The name Rivendell comes from the Lord of the Rings. Couldn't think of a reliable city name, so used this one. Chapter 106. Rivendell, pft, that name really takes me out of the moment, it reminds me of the Lord of the Rings. Could it be another ruin of an elf city? Wait, did we trigger some hidden storyline? Hearing Carlos's words, the players were instantly thrown into a state of excitement. They put down what they were doing and surrounded Carlos immediately. Grandfather Carlos, could you tell us more about Rivendell in detail? This Rivendell, is it an elf city? Where is it located? Is it near us or not? Seeing the chosen one's eager expressions, Carlos found it very curious. However, remembering that they had only just arrived in this world shortly ago and knew little about the history of the elves, Carlos suddenly understood. He set down his hammer, a trace of nostalgia appearing on his face. Rivendell, in Elvish, it means deep chasm, a city built at the border of the Jade Mountain and the Elf Forest, located to the south of the Elf Forest and just north of the Jade Mountain range, probably 100 or 200 kilometers from here. Finishing his words, his expression grew slightly gloomy. Jade Mountain, which is now the Dark Mountain Range. 1,000 years ago, it was also the core area of the Elf Kingdom, but everything was destroyed in the war. Rivendell was a miraculous city, built in a valley with breathtaking landscapes. It had the largest mine of the Elf Kingdom and was also its manufacturing hub. The elven equipment and various magic devices produced in Rivendell were once all the rage worldwide. As he spoke, Carlos's expression was full of excitement, mixed with a bit of pride and reverie. But after a moment, he let out a slight sigh. Sadly, in the war 1,000 years ago, Rivendell and Jade Mountain were destroyed together. Now, all that remains is a bottomless chasm left by the Battle of the Gods, and Rivendell has turned to ruins. The Grand Canyon opened up a passage between the underworld and the ground world. It's said that the current Rivendell has become a haven for underground monsters. It's the existence of the Grand Canyon that severed the connection between the Jade Mountain Range and the Elf Forest. Now the only entrance and exit on the south side of the Elf Forest are to the southeast, near the Half-Beast tribe. Otherwise, we wouldn't be ambushed by the Half-Beasts on our way back from other passages. As Carlos spoke, he clenched his fist. The old elves who died in battle were almost all his friends and elders. Thinking of this, Carlos's eyes turned red, vision slightly blurry. He sniffed his crimson nose and forced a smile, saying, getting old makes one sentimental." After speaking, he pulled himself together, hope on his face. Ah, those are things of the past, better left unsaid. Now that the mother goddess has returned, everything about the elf clan will get better. I believe, one day, we will also be able to drive away the monsters occupying Rivendell and re-establish the glory of the elves, just like in Felenqui. As he spoke, he was spirited and turned to look at the chosen ones. Everything will be better, let's work hard together. But when he turned around, he was stunned. Because he discovered that the chosen ones, who were just helping him with work and listening to his historical account, had suddenly dwindled by more than half. Originally there were 30 or 40 people, and now only 7 or 8 were left, and a small half were females. Carlos! Where did everyone go? He looked astonished. A blonde, blue-eyed female chosen one, who had been listening intently to his story, wore a strange expression. She glanced outside, trying to suppress her laughter, and answered. I guess, they might have gone to look for Rivendell. Carlos. The history Carlos recounted was like a pebble thrown onto a lake surface. Just 100 to 200 kilometers south of the elf forest, north of the dark mountain range, there was still an elf city. Its name was Rivendell. And, it once was the elf clan's greatest manufacturing hub, likely holding many treasures. Not just that, it was also connected to the underworld, with many rumored monsters. Treasures. Monsters. A new map. This was undoubtedly a new map. Could it be another main storyline? For a moment, the chosen ones who received the message became excited all at once. Meanwhile, the leaders of the 3 major player guilds also received the news. Holy cow! Brother Mew, Brother Mew! It looks like we triggered a hidden storyline. High chance of a new map. Meow! Meow! Extra, extra! I found clues to a new elf city ruin. This time our guild should definitely take the lead, right? I hear it once was the elf manufacturing center, surely there are lots of ancient texts related to construction. Tomato giant. We've got it. We've got it. There's finally a lead on the elf ruins we've been searching for in the wilderness. I heard there are many monsters there. This time, we can definitely have a great time slaying. In an instant, all the chosen ones were in a frenzy. Rivendell. Just after receiving a task from Alice to look after 2 little elf girls, Li Mu checked the guild messages, showing an expression of surprise. He thought for a moment, handed each little elf girl a berry, and told them to play on their own. Afterward, he entered the natural temple, saluted Alice, who was issuing daily tasks, and respectfully asked. Lord Alice, do you know about Rivendell? Rivendell. Alice slightly paused in her movement. Her expression carried a hint of nostalgia. It used to be one of our elf clan's most flourishing cities, but it's now turned to ruins. Hearing her words, Li Mu's spirit was lifted. Then, do you know the precise location of Rivendell? Alice gave him a look and shook her head. I've never been there. Then, she added. However, Rivendell was built in a valley. After its destruction, it became connected to the Grand Canyon north of the Dark Mountain Range. If you follow the canyon, you're sure to find it. At this point, she seemed to notice something, and she warned Li Mu. I have to caution you, I've heard it's connected to the passage of the underworld, becoming a monster paradise and very dangerous. You'd better not take any risks. All right, thank you, Lord Alice. Hearing the holy daughter's words, Li Mu showed a look of delight. He thanked Alice while messaging his guild members in his awareness. I confirmed with Alice, there is indeed an elf city named Rivendell. Apparently, it used to be quite prosperous. Alice also gave me some methods to find it. However, Alice said it's very dangerous. I suggest our guild's interested players form several exploration teams and conduct separate explorations. As for the person responsible for the exploration task, let's let Dima handle it. Seeing Li Mu's message, the players of the Nature's Heart Guild responded, received. At this time, Dima suddenly asked in the guild chat. Brother Mu, why aren't you going? Li Mu's lips curled slightly as he typed back. I'm on a task from Alice to take care of the kids, and the reward is 1000 contribution points. Haha, I can't leave. Dima. Nature's Heart Guild players. My gosh, 1000 contribution points is expected of the only purple NPC. So envious. Tisk, does a high affection level allow you to do whatever you want? Li Mu replied smugly. Sorry, a high affection level indeed allows me to do whatever I want. Dima. Nature's Heart Guild Players. Chapter 107. Seek another elven city, Rivendell. Although the players had not received any relevant main quest, as soon as Carlos pointed it out, their attention to this city grew increasingly intense. And as players further interacted with other NPCs, more information about Rivendell, the once elven city, became available. A miraculous city, the largest vein, a legendary crafting capital. The halo around Rivendell was no less than that of the holy city of Felenqui. In fact, Rivendell, Felenqui, and the capital of the Elf Kingdom were originally the most famous three cities of the Elf Kingdom. In the game, there could not be data without meaning and value. Players strongly believed that this information about Rivendell must be another hidden quest. Perhaps it was even related to the upcoming mainline. In no time, players, whether spontaneously or organized by guilds, formed exploration teams one after another, wanting to find this city. Ruins meant treasure. And the ruins of Rivendell were said to be connected to the underworld, full of countless monsters. Adventure, wasn't this exactly what players pursued? Their actions even startled the NPCs. Many young elves from the Flame Tribe were also curious about this city, with some even wanting to join the chosen ones ready for exploration, but they were stopped by their elders. Moreover, they received scoldings from the old elves. Rivendell is full of terrifying monsters. Are the chosen ones immortal beings? Are you? You're almost 200 years old, can't you mature a little? Just gaining lifespan but not intelligence? Still thinking of yourselves as kids under 100? Look at Divine Favored Ale. He's only 80, and he's so sensible, even favored by the Mother Goddess. What about you? If you don't behave, I'll send you to Carlos to be apprentices. Finally, those curious young elves had to abandon their pursuits, staying obediently in Felenqui, assisting their tribe in repairing the holy city, all dejected. The players' actions also caught Eve's attention. She paid a little attention, and immediately understood the situation. Rivendell. Her heart stirred. It seemed I had overlooked this city. In the inheritance of the world tree that Eve received, this city was mentioned quite frequently as well. She even had the image of Rivendell being split in two by a blade from a divine being. And it was this very sword that formed the great rift separating the dark mountain range and the elf forest. Documents and treasures aside, if it's truly connected to the underworld, it might actually turn out to be a promising new map. According to the inheritance, the underworld isn't peaceful and honestly quite suitable for players to cause a stir. Eve thought with interest. She didn't release any related quests but instead remembered the players' movements, no longer focusing on them. Currently, her main focus still lay on the half-beasts and the restoration of the holy city of Felenqui. The half-beast stronghold near the elf forest had to be eradicated as soon as possible. Under her instructions, Divine Favored El, Berserker Bassa, and Natural Saintess Alice had already issued missions to find half-beast strongholds. The Flame Tribe had a rough idea of the location of the half-beast tribe, but not the exact spot. Little Black Dragon seemed to know but refused to cooperate. To win its heart as quickly as possible, Eve didn't intend to use force on it. However, Eve believed that the players should soon find the half-beast stronghold. After all, the area they needed to investigate had become quite small. As for Rivendell, the terrain around the rift was treacherous, with many high-level demon beasts. If players wanted to discover Rivendell, it wasn't a matter of a day or two. Finding it within 1 or 2 months would be commendable. After all, there were just a few players who persisted in searching, with most people giving up quickly without external motivation. The primary issue now is the half-beasts and the restoration of the holy city. Bringing the Flame Tribe on track is also important. As for Rivendell, it can be set aside for now. If they truly discover Rivendell by chance, then I can create a hidden storyline. Eve contemplated. Dark Mountain Range, Rock Cave Tribe. The days of the half-beast priest had recently been very tough. He had not closed his eyes for 3 days and nights. And the only reason was that the team he had sent to ambush the elves seemed to have vanished without a trace, like a pebble thrown into the sea. More than 300 people, the bravest warriors of the tribe, and not a single one returned. This incident had already stirred dissatisfaction and panic among some of the tribesmen. Moreover, even the Black Dragon Merrill who went along hadn't returned. Jushin had sent people to the ruined castle on the mountaintop to check. The protective magic Merrill had set around the nest was still intact. Additionally, through the windows, faint glimpses of its hoarded gold and gemstones could be seen. Dragons are lovers of treasure, if it had moved, it couldn't possibly leave its hoard behind. This indicated that Meryl had also encountered some sudden situation, forcing it to be unable to return. Or perhaps, it was already dead. Thinking of this, the elderly high priest became increasingly horrified. Over 300 half-beasts, and a silver upper-level black dragon. They had vanished as if they'd been evaporated. Jushin sent people to investigate, and at the edge of the elf forest, only traces of battle and some bloodstains remained. Not a single corpse. Not a single piece of remaining equipment. What on earth did they encounter? The more Jushin pondered, the more terrified he became. At this point, the elf forest seemed to him like a fearsome, devouring beast. What kind of existence could accomplish all this? Could it be, there's a legend within the elf forest? Is it, the favored of the death god? The giant mountain priest had already considered giving up this stronghold and leading his people to another place. The treasure hoarded by Black Dragon Meryl should be enough to support the migration of the tribesmen. If Meryl were still around, Jushin would never dare think of taking its treasure, but now things were different. In his view, there was an 80% chance Meryl had met a grim fate too. Still, the Rock Cave tribe initially settled here by the decree of the god of winter and hunting. Without the father's divine command, the giant mountain priest didn't dare easily make the decision to migrate. He had prayed to the father multiple times lately, requesting the tribe's migration, but received no approval. Why, is the father not responding to me? This made Jushin increasingly uneasy inside. Just as he hesitated whether to directly arrange a sacrificial array to communicate with the father at the risk of angering him, a half-beast priest stumbled in from outside the cavern. High priest! High priest! He was out of breath. Jushin frowned. What happened now? The approaching half-beast priest saluted him, speaking between pants and excitement. There's a high-level professional in the tribe. High-level professional? The eyes of Jushin narrowed slightly. He claims to be the divine favored of the father. The priest spoke excitedly. Chapter 108. When the high priest of Jushin arrived at the main tent of the Rock Cave tribe, he finally saw the visitor. It was a tall figure seated at the principal position, clad in an entirely black robe, with a high white collar, and a blood-red rose pinned to the left chest. His appearance was as handsome as an elf, with shoulder-length black hair tied into a single ponytail, a pale complexion, and a pair of crimson eyes keenly observing the half-beast Jushin entering the main tent. The pupils of the half-beast high priest slightly contracted. Nightwalker. Upon hearing his exclamation, a hint of a roguish smile appeared on the mysterious visitor's lips. I didn't expect my name to have traveled here. He snapped his fingers, and a transparent glass appeared in his hand as if by magic, filled with bright red blood. He took a gentle sip and then said, "However, I prefer to be called Count." The high priest of Jushin revitalized, drew a bow-shaped symbol on his chest, and bowed to the other. "Praise the Father God. Count, the Rock Cave tribe welcomes your arrival." Nightwalker. That was a famed divine favored of the god of winter and hunting in the Segis world. The Nightwalker was not a beastman, but a member of the blood clan originally devoted to darkness, yet he was converted in a war by the Father God's faith, becoming the divine favored of a true god. No one knew the Nightwalker's true name, but he preferred others to call him Count because he was truly a high-level professional, with the power of lower gold. In the blood clan, this was the Count level tier. Having confirmed the visitor's identity, Jushin slightly relaxed. The arrival of a divine favored also implied the true god's attention was focused here because a divine favored was the eyes of a true god. The Father God had not forgotten them. And as one of the few races following Uller, Nightwalker was favored by her. He often engaged with faith forces of other true gods in roles like a visitor, mediator, or scout, resembling Uller's diplomat in the mortal realm. And upon seeing Nightwalker, the anxiety and apprehension that had troubled the half-beast Jushin for days calmed considerably. "You, having come here, you should already know about the elf forest, right?" he probed tentatively. The Nightwalker nodded. "I came here at the behest of the Father God." Having said that, he rose from his seat, one hand behind his back, gently shaking the glass in his other hand. Watching the blood sway with its motion in the cup, the Nightwalker's expression gradually turned solemn. "The true god suspects a new god is rising in the elf forest, so I'm sent to check it out." Divine enthronement. The pupils of the high priest of Jushin slightly contracted. If a true god was hidden behind the elf forest, then everything made sense. However, he soon became perplexed again. Count, if I may be blunt, there haven't been any signs of divine enthronement in the elf forest in recent years. Besides, magical power in Yggdrasil has been dwindling for a millennium, and there hasn't even been the birth of a demigod, let alone a true god. The prerequisites for divine enthronement were quite stringent. Only a high-level plane with abundant magical power could support divine enthronement. Moreover, the waves of divine enthronement were incredibly strong. If a new god were to ascend, the nearby rock cave tribe would definitely sense it. As a high priest, Jushin knew these things. Nightwalker chuckled. Who said a divine enthronement ceremony is necessary? That one's true form still lies within the elf forest, and 1,000 years have passed, the sealing divine arts should be broken by now, right? You must have heard of how those under your excellency ascended to the divine seats during the twilight of the gods. Upon hearing his words, Jushin's pupils contracted again. Directly merging the divine position and divinity? How is that possible? Nightwalker smiled again. Ordinarily, it would be impossible, but what if other true gods helped? For instance, the one from the netherworld. In fact, Eula originally had this plan. But due to warnings from the gods and the presence of seals, she did not dare take action. However, Hela was different. She remained in the netherworld for a long time, and despite having left a true god seat in the pantheon, she rarely interacted with the gods of the heavenly realm. And as the lord of the underworld, as long as she stayed at home, she was not afraid of the dominion of the three divine systems of the pantheon in her domain. Thus, the gods' warnings were stressful for Hela, but not as fatal as they were for Euler. If she dared to do something, it wouldn't be surprising. Of course, believers were unaware of these matters. This was a secret among true gods. Believers knowing the death god might have acted was already sufficient. Upon hearing this, a thought flashed briefly in Jushin's mind, relating to the death god's divine favored mentioned by the father god. For a moment, he felt like he grasped the truth of the matter. Seeing the change in Jushin's expression, Nightwalker appeared quite pleased. It seems you have thought of it too. After speaking, his expression gradually became serious. Nature and life have been the father god's pursuit for a millennium, and simultaneously, also the objective of the one from the netherworld. Although that one from the netherworld cannot come in true form, she can nonetheless support a new god. Hela governed death, aging, and disease. These divine positions were contrary to the life divine position, yet they also had connecting points. And it was no secret within the true gods of the Yggdrasil universe that Hela's divine position was incomplete. The life divine position similarly attracted her. It's said that mastering contradictory divine positions could cause divine soul turbulence, potentially leading a true god to madness, but Hela did not need to do this. She only needed to support a sub-god related to life and gain information about the rules of life from them to complete her incomplete death divine position. All this was Euler's conjecture. And she shared with her divine favored that Hela was very likely to take action. So, Count, do you have any plans? The forces hiding within the elf forest are extremely powerful, and we've already lost hundreds of warriors and a black dragon. The high priest of Jushin said worriedly. Moreover, they were annihilated with overwhelming power, and there wasn't even a commotion. At this, the glass in Nightwalker's hand slightly paused, and his expression gradually turned solemn. But soon, he lightly laughed. No rush. I've already sent my favored beast to secretly infiltrate the forest and investigate for me. Favored beast? Jushin's expression brightened. Nightwalker possessed the ability to summon favored beasts. This skill allowed ordinary animals to be under his control, helping him explore the unknown. And Nightwalker was especially adept at controlling seemingly harmless creatures, like wild rabbits and deer, completely unpreventable. Moreover, the images seen by the animals could be transmitted back, a rather advanced reconnaissance ability. With that, Nightwalker gestured, and magic power gradually manifested a scene before him. Jushin, invigorated, hastily looked at the scene. He was also curious about what was happening in the elf forest. However, the view was black. Dead. Nightwalker was slightly taken aback. Seeing Jushin's surprised expression, Nightwalker cleared his throat and said, Ahem, this often happens as the favored beasts are merely ordinary beasts, and accidents can occur. But I summoned more than one. After saying this, he switched the scene again. Still black. Nightwalker's eyebrows raised, somewhat surprised. Also dead? A mistake, let me switch to another. He waved his arm, changing the scene again. Still black. Jushin. Nightwalker. The atmosphere grew a bit awkward for a moment. Chapter 109. The Night Stalker switched through several visuals, finding them all black. This meant that the majority of the favored beasts he had sent out were dead. This gradually made his expression somewhat unpleasant. Cough, cough, Count, could it be that your surveillance has been discovered? Watching the Blood Clan member's face turn from pale to blue, Jushin cautiously said. Impossible. The Night Stalker instinctively retorted loudly. He took a deep breath, steadied his mood, and continued speaking elegantly. The favored beasts I summon are just ordinary animals. They have not exposed a trace of magic power, so it couldn't have been detected so easily. This must be a coincidence. As he spoke, he continued changing the visuals. After switching through 7 or 8 more, the Night Stalker finally found a normal visual. It showed the perspective of a wild rabbit, running swiftly with a constantly shaking view. The Night Stalker's expression gradually became calm. See, there is one. With the enhancement of magic power in the elf forest, the activity of demon beasts has become frequent. It's normal for favored beasts to be attacked, but as long as one survives, I can still get what I want to see. After hearing the Night Stalker's words, Jushin's expression gradually became respectful. Indeed worthy of the divine favored. This kind of detection ability was truly powerful and unpreventable. The scenario in the visual kept changing, and the two watched intently. Judging by these plants, we should be close to the core area. Jushin's expression also gradually became expectant. At this time, the scene in the visual changed, and several tall, armed figures appeared. They were wearing luxurious equipment, chatting and laughing. Elves. Jushin's eyes lit up. At this moment, the elves seemed to notice the wild rabbit and simultaneously looked towards the perspective. Have they been discovered? Jushin's expression tightened. The Night Stalker took a sip of fresh blood, and casually said. Relax. It's just a wild rabbit. They won't care, and how could elves attack animals? He didn't finish his sentence. Because the elves in the visual suddenly became excited. They drew various weapons and quickly charged towards the view. A spear flew straight towards the perspective. Soon, the screen turned red and then black. Jushin. Night Stalker. The Night Stalker's lip twitched. His expression shifted, then he gritted his teeth and said. I didn't expect my favored beast to be discovered by the other side. It seems their control over the elf forest is scarier than I imagined. However, I still have my final trick. He waved his hand again, and the view suddenly shifted to a high altitude. This is the last favored beast I sent out, a mountain eagle. The Night Stalker said with a calm face. The view moved downwards, and the two gradually saw the scene in the forest. As the scene kept moving, they eventually saw the Felenqui ruins. Felenqui was incredibly lively, with a swarm of elves, like ants, bustling in the ruins, repairing the ancient city. Looking across, there were hundreds of them. So many elves. Jushin gasped. But the Night Stalker saw something else. A temple. There's actually a temple. He saw a temple in Felenqui. From the outside, this temple had a bit of a human temple vibe, but it was unclear which divine it belonged to. However, this indicated one thing. In the elf forest, there indeed were workings of a true god. The mountain eagle's view gradually changed, and the silhouette of the world tree entered their eyes. Just as they remembered, the world tree still appeared withered, but beneath it, a stunning city emerged. Father God above, when did this city appear? Overlooking the elf town built by the players, Jushin was dumbfounded. What a beautiful city! The Night Stalker's eyes lit up. This city was full of the natural style of elves, yet it also had many architectural styles never seen before. They combined perfectly, making the entire city look like an exquisite work of art. Wait, what is that? Suddenly, the half-beast saw a few elves gathered around a bonfire. The Night Stalker felt a stirring in his heart and slightly enlarged the view in the visual. They were elves gathered around the bonfire, having a barbecue. On the bonfire was a mountain deer being roasted. The Night Stalker fell silent. Because he recognized it as one of his favored beasts. Seeing the elves barbecuing venison, Jushin was utterly shocked. Elves actually eat meat. The Night Stalker's expression grew increasingly solemn. After a moment, he sighed and said. It seems that behind the elf forest, there might indeed be a newly risen divine. Only a true god can forcibly alter a race's habits. These elves, they must have started following a new true god. Moreover, the style of those temples is unprecedented. Heh, it seems that the beliefs of the long ears can indeed be changed. In the Segis world, true gods' temples each had their characteristics. Often, just the exterior could reveal which divine they belonged to. But the temples they saw had styles that were never seen before. Coupled with the change in the elves' nature, nothing else could more clearly indicate the truth. At this moment, the visual suddenly wobbled, turned red again, and fell into darkness. The two fell into silence. After a moment, the Night Stalker stood up. My surveillance must have been discovered by the other side. But, it's all right, I have intentions of paying them a visit. Upon hearing this, Jushin's expression tightened. You are going personally? The Night Stalker smiled slightly, with a proud look. I am a divine favored of the Father God and have some minute strength, rest assured. Elf Forest. Black Dragon Merrill took a mountain eagle in its mouth, munching and swallowing it, spitting out a mouthful of feathers. Disgusting, much worse than roasted meat. After saying this, it glanced curiously at the temple. Why did the evil god ask me to catch a bird? However, it soon didn't care and flew beside the players who were barbecuing. As they watched the huge black shadow suddenly descend, the players were unfazed. They all started trying to curry favor. Oh! It's Lord Merrill, hold on a second, hey! The venison still needs some more time on the fire. Lord Black Dragon, let me tell you, this venison is delicious. Recently, many of these animals have been running into the forest, and they taste much better than regular demon beasts. That's right. This is premium game meat. Quick, roast it, roast it. In a while, we'll give the finest drumstick to Lord Merrill. Merrill listened, a hint of satisfaction appearing on its dragon face. But quickly, it put on a stern face again. Humph! Cruel creatures! I'm just passing by and have no interest in your food at all. After speaking, it licked its lips and added. For venison, adding some honey improves the taste. Players. In the high skies. Eve saw the mountain eagle being killed and let out a sigh of relief. I didn't expect to attract the attention of others. Fortunately, they didn't see Berserker. It seems, the affairs of the elf forest can't be concealed any longer. I need to think of a way to dress things up properly. Chapter 110. In the southeastern area of the elf forest, Boxed Lunch was leading his combat squad on an exploration. Boxed Lunch, now that all the major guilds have begun searching for Rivendell, why aren't we heading there? One of the players asked curiously. Boxed Lunch fell silent for a moment, then said. No mission. No mission? The remaining team members were momentarily stunned. But soon, they realized that Boxed Lunch was referring to the fact that the goddess had not issued any related tasks. One of the team members sighed. Boxed Lunch, I think we don't have to act according to the tasks issued by the goddess every time. This game has a high level of freedom, we can completely explore on our own, and we might even stumble upon a hidden storyline. Boxed Lunch was silent for a moment again, then said. When we take a mission, we should finish it well. Player. Boxed Lunch was not wrong either, they had received a mission from Alice to find the half-beast's stronghold. Indeed, finding the stronghold was the priority. But, knowing is one thing, seeing all the players on the forum rushing to find Rivendell, with this legendary city being so mysterious as told by the NPCs, it was hard not to be tempted. It won't be long. Boxed Lunch threw down another line, leaping forward at a brisk pace. The rest of the team exchanged looks and had no choice but to follow. They were already approaching the edge of the elf forest, and based on the information obtained from the elves of the Flame tribe, it was estimated that they would soon find traces of the half-beasts. In fact, if it weren't for the righteous Black Dragon Merrill refusing to be their guide, they would have already tracked down the half-beasts. While on the move, suddenly, Boxed Lunch stopped. His expression instantly became very serious. What's wrong? Seeing their captain acting as if facing a great enemy, the other players immediately became alert. Someone is approaching, the opponent is very strong. Boxed Lunch said in a deep voice. Upon hearing this, the expressions of the other players turned solemn in an instant. Boxed Lunch was of the hunter profession, and he had recently exchanged for a scouting aura ability. Coupled with his originally strong awareness, his warning capability was very powerful. Boxed Lunch's words were never aimless. Clap, Clap, clap. Just as everyone was on alert, a series of elegant clapping sounds suddenly came from ahead. A tall figure gradually appeared in front of them. A handsome, pale face, crimson eyes, a black single ponytail, and that perpetually crease-free black robe. It was a Nightwalker. Not bad, very vigilant. He gestured lightly, and a goblet filled with blood appeared in his hand, which he sipped lightly. In an instant, the players' faces turned solemn. Because they hadn't sensed this person's approach at all. At this moment, they were once again amazed by Boxed Lunch's perception. And after their vigilance, they gradually began to get excited. Is this a new NPC? Could they be about to trigger a hidden storyline? The Nightwalker was powerful, but not only that, as a member of the self-proclaimed Noble Blood clan, they had quite a flair in their attire and demeanor. To put it plainly, they were very flashy and ostentatious. His entrance indeed stunned several players, giving them a bit of imagination. Boxed Lunch's eyes also brightened slightly, and he said in a deep voice. Who are you, sir? The Nightwalker was somewhat surprised. The characteristics of the Blood clan were quite distinctive, but these elves didn't seem to recognize him. Not only that, but after he appeared, he did not conceal his powerful aura. Yet the elves on the opposite side, aside from being vigilant, weren't afraid or intimidated. Instead, they seemed somewhat excited. Truly ignorant and strange elves. The Nightwalker's lips curved into a slight smile, and his crimson eyes suddenly burst forth with a deep red light. His voice was irrefutable. I command you, to tell me your origins and who the entity behind you is. What is she planning? A subtle spiritual wave emanated from the Nightwalker, rushing straight into the minds of several people. Soul domination. This was a spirit control type magic of the Nightwalker, acting directly on the soul. Anyone with soul power lower than his would become his puppet. However, to the Nightwalker's surprise, he was met not with their submission but with expressions that seemed to be looking at an idiot. Why should we submit? Why would we tell you these things? Nightwalker. It didn't work? His eyes widened in sheer surprise. Is this NPC dumb? Seeing his dazed expression, a player mumbled. The Nightwalker's face darkened. He coldly snorted, and his entire body turned into a shadow. Watch out! Boxed Lunch's face changed. Even before the players could react, the Nightwalker had already rushed up and grabbed the throat of the unlucky player who had just spoken. The other players immediately tensed, quickly drawing their weapons to attack the Nightwalker, but the Nightwalker just lightly raised his hand and blocked all their attacks. So strong! The players' expressions were shocked. They knew that the average level of Boxed Lunch's team was definitely the highest among all players. They exchanged a glance, nodded, and turned to flee. If they couldn't win, they would run. Standing firm was not a thing for players. Especially now that the perfect respawn count was dropping less frequently, every life was important to them. Even Boxed Lunch hesitated for a moment, glanced at the player caught by the Nightwalker, and chose to escape as well. Who are you? Sorry, the hidden storyline's all yours. He shouted to the captured player before fleeing. Who are you? Seeing his teammates attempting to escape, a hint of ridicule flickered across the Nightwalker's expression. He let out a cold snort, and countless black bats were released from him, enveloping the fleeing players and biting them. The players were horrified to find that their bodies gradually lost control under the bats' bites. Their bodies stiffened, and they fell to the ground one by one. Boxed Lunch's face changed, pulling out a dagger to ward off the attacking bats, but after taking down the other players, all the bats converged on him alone. Even he couldn't hold on for long and eventually collapsed slowly. Boxed Lunch gritted his teeth, raised his dagger, and sliced his own arm, the blood flowing freely. But even so, he couldn't break free from the paralysis. After subduing all the players, the bats returned to the Nightwalker's body. This was his bat transformation, capable of secreting a special toxin of the Blood clan that would numb the target's body and eventually render them out of control. It's a toxin commonly used by the Blood clan when hunting blood supply targets. Even with Boxed Lunch's self-infliction, freedom was impossible. The Nightwalker was quite satisfied. He shifted his gaze to the player he had grabbed. The player named Hu Lu looked at his fallen teammates with a helpless expression. Still, he showed no fear but instead examined the Nightwalker with curious and innocent eyes. Based on Dima's experience, cooperating appropriately when captured could trigger a hidden storyline. Nightwalker. Hulu's compliant expression made the Nightwalker even more surprised, even causing him to shudder involuntarily. Ignorant and fearless, and a bit nauseating, strange elf. He squinted his eyes and once more cast soul domination. This time, the target was only Hu Lu. Yet his magical spiritual attack fell like a stone into the sea, without a ripple. Immune to spirit-type magic, hey! The Nightwalker murmured. A thought crossed his mind, and his eyes turned crimson again. Tell me, your secrets and, what was that hidden mission you mentioned earlier? This time, he abandoned spirit-type magic. Instead, he chose psychological suggestion, directly affecting the consciousness. Chapter 111. This time, the Nightwalker's psychological suggestion didn't fall flat. Hu Lu widened his eyes, and his gaze began to turn vacant. It was a sign that the psychological suggestion was about to succeed. The Nightwalker was very satisfied. Immune to mental spells, but psychological suggestion works. This means there's something wrong with their souls. Maybe their souls are under some kind of protection. However, just when he thought his psychological suggestion was about to succeed, Hu Lu's eyes rolled back, and his head limpingly tilted to the side. Nightwalker. What happened? He was slightly stunned. Listening to the even breathing, the Nightwalker's expression became quite colorful. Fell asleep. How could he fall asleep in this situation? He wasn't using a sleeping spell. The Nightwalker's expression darkened. He snorted coldly and delivered a punch to Hu Lu's chin. However, the other party still had no response. It wasn't pretending, he had really fallen asleep. The Nightwalker's eyebrows gradually knitted together. He looked again at the other players, who met his gaze and sheepishly smiled. Seeing that they were neither afraid nor surprised by the sleeping elf, the Nightwalker felt a stirring in his heart. Tell me, what's wrong with him? He asked the players. What else, he's just disconnected. One of them said nonchalantly. Disconnected? What did that mean? The Nightwalker was utterly perplexed. However, he was already certain that the other elves seemed to know something. Therefore, he decisively cast psychological suggestion on them again. Tell me, who exactly is the power behind you? What conspiracy is there? Yet to his frustration but not surprisingly, as soon as they encountered the psychological suggestion, the remaining few also rolled their eyes and fell asleep. The Nightwalker's expression was very unpleasant. Unable to resist psychological suggestion, but seems to have some self-preservation ability, falling into a strange sleep when suggested. Being able to employ this ability on every elf, it looks like, the other side's soul knowledge is quite exquisite. It's likely they are followers of the death god. A hint of realization rose in the Nightwalker's heart. He waved his hand, preparing to completely eliminate the sleeping elves, but suddenly stopped. He smelled a very enticing aroma. The Nightwalker raised an eyebrow, followed the scent, and found it was coming from a wound on He Fan's arm. Blood? Is there something special about it? The Nightwalker's gaze instantly turned very deep. The Blood clan couldn't do without blood, they needed to consume other life's blood periodically to sustain themselves. And high-quality blood was the supreme pursuit of every Blood clan member. He licked his lips, came to He Fan's side, dipped his slender fingers in a touch of blood, and sent it into his mouth. With the blood in his mouth, the Nightwalker's eyes instantly brightened. His expression became incredibly intoxicated in that moment. Such rich and fragrant blood. At this moment, his look toward the elves changed again. Though it was said among the clan that the blood of the silver race was extremely rich and delicious, I didn't expect these elves' blood to be so excellent, comparable to the precious wines preserved by the dukes, perhaps. Such high-quality blood. What are these elves' identities? Moreover, I seem to smell the scent of life. The Nightwalker's gaze gradually turned fiery. At this moment, in his eyes, the elves were not just elves but top-grade ingredients. No, they were top-grade blood slaves. After hesitating slightly, he took out a small red ring from his bosom and recited an incantation in his heart. As his incantation resonated, He Fan's body began to glow and slowly disappear. It's a pity the space ring is too small, only enough for one person. The Nightwalker regretted in his heart. This ring was his storage ring, with a spell supporting biological survival on it, allowing organisms inside to maintain life for 24 hours. The Nightwalker had already decided to capture an elf as his long-term blood slave. As for the rest, he looked at the elves collapsed on the ground, shaking his head regretfully. There was no way to take more. But it couldn't be wasted, either. The Nightwalker came to one of the players, helped him up, and opened his mouth to bite the person's neck. With the entrance of the crimson blood, the Nightwalker's expression became incredibly satisfied and intoxicated. He felt he had never tasted such delicious blood in his life. And as the blood entered, he could even feel a faint loosening at the bottleneck of his strength. Such a magical blood! The Nightwalker's eyes grew brighter. Does it taste good? He nodded. Good. It was truly wondrously good. However, he quickly realized, and his expression turned horrified. Who? The Nightwalker immediately released his bite and leaped up from where he stood. As he looked up, he saw a stranger's figure appearing before him. It was a female clad in a black robe, dark grey hair, and red pupils just like his. However, unlike the Nightwalker's vertical pupils, her eyes were human-like. Upon seeing her, the Nightwalker instantly recognized the woman's identity. A divine favorite of the death god. His expression turned incomparably serious. As a divine favorite of the god of winter and hunting, the Nightwalker's perception of divine power was exceptionally keen. She hadn't covered the aura of the death god's power on her at all, undoubtedly a true divine favored. And, very strong. The Nightwalker's senses had always been sharp, yet he hadn't sensed her approach. She was a high-level professional. Just like himself, she was a high-level professional. Moreover, if they fought, he likely would lose. Various thoughts rapidly flashed through the Nightwalker's mind, and he quickly abandoned any notion of battle. His wary expression suddenly transformed into a breezy smile. He gracefully bowed to the death god's favored. Good afternoon, esteemed and beautiful lady. The death god's favored seemed surprised by his greeting, raising her eyebrows slightly. Her gaze swept across the floor, her voice cold. A divine favored actively attacking followers of another true god, are you trying to incite a war between the true gods? Hearing her words, the Nightwalker's eyelid twitched. Indeed. There was truly a true god behind these elves. Moreover, it was the death god. It seemed the speculation of the true god crowned was correct, the death god indeed made a move. No, no. Suddenly, the Nightwalker's mind stirred, and his eyes began to narrow. Wrong. She is actually leading me on with those words. Those elves don't have the death god's aura, on the contrary, there's a scent of life. This true god, likely isn't the one we thought. It was as if he had opened a window, the Nightwalker suddenly felt like he had uncovered the truth. His eyes suddenly shone, yet a hint of insight rose in his heart. A sub-god. It had to be a sub-god. Migrating elves. The unfamiliar temple. The nascent true god. That was it. The death god was cultivating a sub-god related to the domain of life within the elf forest. Only in this way could it explain why the elves had a personality change. And the death god's favored was actually providing cover. This sub-god probably hadn't fully mastered the domain of life, or perhaps hadn't mastered it completely yet. The entity must still be quite vulnerable. Otherwise, they wouldn't be lurking and hiding. And the death god's purpose became quite clear as well. According to the true god crowned, the one in the netherworld hadn't a complete divine office, likely seeking to perfect her office this way. In an instant, the Nightwalker understood everything. Chapter 112. Having already made up his mind, the Night Wanderer had the intention to retreat. He looked at the other person's unfriendly expression and spread his hands slightly. Honorable lady, I didn't harm them. They fell asleep on their own. After saying this, he smiled slightly again. Please convey my most sincere greetings to the newly ascended divine. The life divine position is an advanced divine position with the potential of a true god. May death god have some gains. Upon hearing his words, Eve, who was disguised as the death god's favored, raised an eyebrow slightly. Are you threatening me? The Night Wanderer smiled again. He didn't answer but took a small sip from the goblet of blood, saying calmly. The divine favored are the eyes of the true god. Having said this, he gave Eve a meaningful look before slowly disappearing. Eve didn't pursue. She understood the other's meaning, her expression somewhat odd. To greet the newly ascended divine, and the life divine position. Does he think a new true god has appeared in the elf forest? After realizing her perilous situation, Eve indeed had been considering such a disguise. Her initial plan was to don the guise of the death god. However, during execution, she found that owning the death god's treasure bead allowed her to manifest a faint aura of the death god's power at most, barely disguising her true traces. After all, the death god's power within the treasure bead was limited, decreasing with each use. In this situation, it was good enough to toy with weaker opponents, but if she truly engaged with a presence stronger than her incarnation or with a divine favored, she was likely to expose her true divine power. If that happened, her disguise as the death god's favored would be blown, ultimately more harmful than beneficial. This was the first reason why Eve chose to spare the Night Wanderer. Though she had donned the guise, killing the lower gold's Night Wanderer, a divine favored, might expose her true situation to Uller. However, after realizing she hadn't inherited the World Tree's divine position in the Pantheon, Eve entertained the idea of adopting a second disguise. That was to disguise herself as a newly emerged true god. The player's uniqueness, the blue star-styled temple, these elements could indeed create some misdirection. And Eve's plan was to combine the first guise and pose as a newly born true god under the death god's banner. This way, she could completely disguise her incarnation as her favored and maneuver as she pleased. The most challenging aspect of this plan was convincing the outside world of her identity. But now it seemed. He seems to have already completed the identity I intended to disguise. I don't know whether to call him clever or foolish. Thinking of the Night Wanderer's confident expression, Eve's expression was peculiar. Not only that, he even used the life divine position to threaten me. Please convey my most sincere greetings to the newly ascended divine. The life divine position is an advanced divine position with the potential of a true god. May death god have some gains. The Night Wanderer's words held two meanings. The first was stating he had seen through the truth in the elf forest, that a new true god related to the life divine position had been born and was even a sub-god of the death god. The second was highlighting the enormous potential of the life divine position, warning the death god to be cautious not to misstep. After all, the death god's divine position and the life divine position are actually equivalent. Trying to support a sub-god with an equivalent divine position might very well lead to backlash, let alone that Hela's death divine position's imperfections are a public secret among the gods. In summary, it was meant to sow discord between the death god and the new god. Unfortunately, even though his guesses were close to the truth, the core part was the complete opposite. However, this also made Eve decide to let him go for now. After all, having an enemy spreading misinformation was more advantageous for Eve. This was the second reason she spared the Night Wanderer. It would be best if Uller's believers spread the truth entirely. In this way, even though it might draw the attention of some legendary figures, demigods, or even true gods, it was still 100 times better than exposing the resurrection of the World Tree. Sometimes, the best way to hide a secret is to expose a false secret to your enemies. Nonetheless, the tracker is already in place. This guy came from the southeast, probably stationed at the half-beast tribe. Perfect for locating. Eve smiled slightly. Settling scores separately, the half-beast tribe was destined to be destroyed. As for the Night Wanderer, if he could be taken out with them, then so be it. However, it would be the new god's favored, not the death god's favored, who would destroy it. This way, the fight would merely involve weak sub-gods of two divine systems, avoiding more true god attention. Conflict among gods of faith is inevitable. However, wars between divine systems carry one meaning, battles between sub-gods another, and fights among sub-god believers yet another. There was also reasoning. A new god subjugated the elves, and the awakening elves, with new beliefs, wanted revenge on the half-beasts, with the true god merely giving a nudge. As long as things didn't get out of hand, the main gods often turned a blind eye. Behind Uller was a greater divine system. Eve wasn't confident in resisting them head-on yet. However, based on her understanding of Uller's conduct recently, she very much doubted whether the other side would conceal the news of the newborn true god. After all, her goal was the divine positions of life and nature. And if she knew the new god was weak, she would certainly have thoughts. If that's the case, even better. Just wait for the other side to deliver themselves slowly. Though still proceeding cautiously, Eve wasn't the newly resurrected Eve anymore. Thinking of this, she looked at the players lying on the ground. Eve's expression gradually grew solemn. Just now, she had forcibly cut off the player's internet connection. Even though souls residing within Blue Star could ignore all soul-related spells, they couldn't avoid those affecting psychological suggestion, which was the Chosen One's greatest weakness. And what Eve could do was to warn them in advance and sever the connection. This weakness is fatal and must be addressed somehow. Otherwise, if the day comes when an army of players engages the enemy, and the enemy collectively issues psychological suggestions, it would be very serious. Eve sighed, feeling a headache forming. Everything has pros and cons. Fortunately, Entities capable of issuing collective psychological suggestions are still far beyond the player's reach. As for individual suggestions, if they could endure, Eve would help, and if not, she would sever the connection in advance. For now, it would have to do. Eve shook her head, snapped her fingers lightly, and slowly disappeared afterward. Once Eve was gone, the players gradually awoke. Wow, finally online. In this day and age, still disconnects? This server is a bit garbage. Hey? Where's everyone? Everyone's gone. Ah. Disconnected at the critical moment. My hidden plot. Where's box lunch? At the edge of the elf forest. The night wanderer dashed a few kilometers away, only breathing a sigh of relief once he was sure the death god's favored hadn't followed. Then his tense expression gradually became indifferent again. Didn't follow, it seems the death god and the new god aren't entirely harmonious. The nail is driven in, as long as there is disharmony, the true god has a chance. After speaking, his expression turned excited. This time, it seems I'll achieve a great feat. Chapter 113. The Night Roamer was excited. The Blood Clan found advancement exceedingly difficult, and he had lingered at the level of lower gold for far too many years. One significant reason he became a divine favored of Euler was to gain formidable strength. And now, he finally saw this possibility. Miraculous blood, combined with the favor of a true god, looks like I'm one step closer to the title of Duke. The Night Roamer thought blissfully as he headed towards the half-beast tribe. However, on his way back, he suddenly stopped. His initially excited mood gradually cooled, and his expression grew solemn. Something's not right. He took out his storage ring, his handsome pale face oscillating between expressions. She couldn't possibly have been unaware that I kidnapped an elf, so why didn't she stop me? The elf forest is vast, so why was she able to arrive so quickly right after I attacked the elf? At that moment, a flash of insight struck in the Night Roamer's mind. He snorted with a laugh and summoned the previously hidden boxed lunch from the ring's space, throwing it to the ground. Is it a tracker? I almost fell for it. These elves, if I can complete the true god's mission, I have plenty of opportunities to hunt them. No need to be hasty now if it means exposing my movements. He took a deep breath to console his aching heart and returned to the half-beast tribe. Upon arriving back at the tribe, the Night Roamer found it bustling. He furrowed his brow slightly, observing dozens of parked wagons on an open space in the rock cave tribe. The wagons were loaded with goods, surrounded by human mercenaries in armor, while many half-beasts crowded around the wagons, raising furs and beast teeth, arguing with several elaborately dressed humans guarded by mercenaries. Further away, several strong half-orc warriors were holding an elf girl while conversing with a noble who was obviously the human leader. The Soren family's smuggling caravan, I presume. Noticing a specific emblem on one wagon, the Night Roamer's face registered a moment of understanding. The Soren family was a consortium family within human society, surviving through smuggling trades. They smuggled magical materials and various rare magic items between several human nations for years, also dabbling in the trade of intelligent species. Their caravan passed through here once every summer, engaging in transactions with the Rock Cave tribe. Generally, they used everyday goods from human society to exchange for the furs and beast teeth in the hands of the half-beast, also trading food and general currency for elves hunted by the half-beast. The Night Roamer gazed for a few more moments before returning his attention to the central tent of the Rock Cave tribe. Upon seeing the Euler statue placed at the center of the tent, the Night Roamer's expression grew apprehensive. He coughed lightly and knelt before the statue in devout prayer. Your Eminence, the Night Roamer has explored the elf forest and now reports the significant findings to you. Upon finishing his words, the statue suddenly emitted a brilliant light, enveloping him in a halo of divine sanctity. The already informed giant mountain priest quickly arrived, and upon seeing the Night Roamer enveloped in the holy light, his expression turned reverently odd. He knew this meant the Night Roamer was receiving the favor of the true god, directly communicating with the true god. Divine favored. This is what a divine favored is. No need for any array, just prayer to gain a direct response from the true god. Watching the Night Roamer aglow with the aura of divine favor, Jushin's face bore a touch of envy and yearning. Yet, he quickly adjusted his mindset and knelt in the direction of the statue. Jushin couldn't hear what the Night Roamer and the Father God communicated, he could only clearly feel the aura of divine favor on the Night Roamer growing more intense, yet the divine power permeating the tent felt exceedingly gentle. This indicated, the Father God was extremely pleased with the information he reported. What exactly did he discover in the elf forest? Jushin grew ever more curious. Finally, the communication between the night roamer and the divine concluded. The brilliance within the tent slowly faded, and at that moment, Jushin heard the imposing, deep voice of the Father God. The Rock Cave Tribe, fully assist the night roamer. Upon these words, the statue returned to normal. A divine oracle. Another divine oracle. Jushin's expression was excited. Suppressing the doubts in his heart, he reverently responded. Jushin, pledges loyalty to the divine oracle. With Jushin's response, the statue finally returned to normal. Jushin slowly stood up, looking at the spirited night roamer with excitement. Your lordship the count, you. The night roamer nodded slightly, smiling as he said. Jushin, there's now an opportunity to gain divine favor. Do you want to partake? Divine favor? Jushin's eyes lit up, then he respectfully inquired. What exactly did you discover in the forest? What do we need to do to assist you? The night roamer squinted his eyes, saying. As observed before, there indeed appeared a newly born true god within the elf forest, and, it's very likely this god is the new deity that your eminence is seeking. Moreover, this true god should belong to the death god's subordinate deities, but her condition seems weak, having yet to fully control her divine duties. Her divine duties probably relate to life, maybe not fully inherited, but at least partially. Listening to the night roamer, Jushin's expression drastically changed. You mean, the one from the netherworld stole the world tree's divine duties, attempting to support a sub-god. Only the death god of the netherworld, with its turtle shell-like safety, would dare go after the world tree while hiding from the other deities. The night roamer smiled lightly with confident determination. 90% sure. After speaking, he licked his lips. This presents an opportunity for your eminence. And for us too. After finishing his words, he stood, expression ablaze with fanaticism. I've already reported everything to your eminence. She has decided to unleash a demigod-level totemic guardian to deliver a fatal strike on the forces within the elf forest. Bringing down a demigod-level totemic guardian directly. Jushin's expression dramatically shifted. The totem guardian was Ullr's divine envoy, with a status comparable to the oak guardian of the world tree and the faith angels of human true gods. This was indeed significant. For thousands of years, the magic power within Segis world had steadily dwindled, and the gods no longer walked the earth themselves, at most sending incarnations or divine envoys to handle mortal affairs. Yet descending cross-dimensionally with demigod-level power incurred great consumption, not to mention the extensive resources believers had to invest up front. Each cross-dimensional intervention was a major expenditure for a true god. Apparently, this time the Father God was truly desperate to secure the divine duties of life. Jushin's expression grew maniacal. In truth, Ullr was indeed anxious. The new god resided in the elf forest and likely plundered the world tree's life divine duties. Such an affront was considerable to her, who had long considered the life divine duties as practically hers. Moreover, as time passed, the new god would undoubtedly become more proficient in controlling the divine duties and increase in strength, especially with the death god meddling behind the scenes. Yet fortunately, the new god's concealing tactics indicated her weakness. Her reluctance to reveal herself surely stemmed from her inability to protect her divine duties due to lacking strength. This was Ullr's chance. She didn't intend to leak this matter nor called upon other divine favored, opting instead to direct her most trusted totemic guardians. The totem guardian was Ullr's right-hand aide. In critical moments, Ullr might even sacrifice them for her divine descent. But after hearing the night roamer, Jushin's expression was conflicted. Our tribe doesn't possess sufficient resources to sustain a guardian's descent. What of it? The night roamer smiled faintly, gazing at the castle atop the rear mountain. Didn't you mention before there was once a dragon nest back there? Although juvenile, the accumulated wealth should suffice. Furthermore, hasn't the Sorin caravan arrived just now? They already engage in smuggling magic materials across major kingdoms, and their stock must be ample. The dragon's hoard could be used to acquire a batch of resources from them. That's possible? Jushin's eyes lit up. After all, Black Dragon Merrill was dead. Its wealth was the half-beast's wealth, right? Chapter 114. Elf Forest. The Black Dragon Merrill lay bored in her nest, watching two players barbecuing nearby. She lazily said. Hurry up. Lord Merrill is already very hungry. Her nest was no longer the dirt pit she had initially dug herself. Instead, little Xian Miao had used the power of wealth to gather guild members to build a small fortress for her, warm in winter and cool in summer. Considering the dragon's habits, the players had designed the dragon nest to resemble a castle, at least, from the outside it seemed so. Inside, it was covered with shiny decorations. These decorations had all been salvaged from equipment redeemed from the contribution mall by little Xian Miao using accumulated contribution points, making the players exclaim at the extravagance and sigh in wonder at how money was indeed power. However, regardless of the quality of the equipment provided by the mall, the special effects were certainly splendid. Although not real treasures, their shiny gloss was enough to catch the black dragon's eye. At least, they barely substituted for gemstones and gold coins, which was acceptable. Meryl expressed great satisfaction, finding these strange long-eared creatures much more pleasant to look at. These guys, despite being cruel and evil, would actually be a great choice if they could become part of my clansmen. At least they're much more capable than the silly half-beasts. Those guys didn't even put honey on their roast. Lord Meryl certainly wasn't just in it for the roast. The little black dragon nodded her head in thought. She glanced at the two players barbecuing and continued to urge them. Hurry up! Whoever finishes first, Lord Meryl will reward them with a drop of her saliva. Upon hearing these words, the eyes of the two players lit up, and they moved even faster with their hands. Watching the players grow ever more industrious, the black dragon Meryl was quite pleased. She lifted her head proudly, her expression scornful. These greedy yet pathetic beings, Lord Meryl could win them over with just a drop of her saliva. Lord Meryl was truly clever and great. Little did the little black dragon know that her seemingly worthless dragon saliva was actually quite a good magical material. For mages, dragon saliva was quite precious. Ever since a player collected the black dragon's saliva and traded it for astounding benefits with the elf mage from the Flame tribe, Meryl's saliva had become a coveted item. All one had to do was prepare barbecue for her to exchange for dragon saliva. Barbecuing was so simple. This was practically a windfall. Thus, more and more players shamelessly came to barbecue for the little black dragon, grilling from dawn to dusk, almost treating Meryl like a pig being raised. Gradually, the players' courage grew too, with someone asking Meryl whether she could provide some dragon blood. Of course, the player who asked was kicked away by Meryl on the spot. Saliva could be spared. Wanting Lord Meryl's blood? In your dreams. When little Xian Miao came before the black dragon, Meryl was feasting heartily. She looked at Meryl's form, chuckled, and said, "Remier, have you gotten a bit chubby these past 2 days?" The black dragon Meryl flicked her tail, casting a glance at little Xian Miao, and lazily said, "You should call me Lord Meryl." However, though she said this, she wasn't really angry at little Xian Miao for calling her by her name directly. After these days, little Xian Miao's efforts hadn't gone to waste, and she'd finally at least become familiar with the little black dragon. At least, casual conversation was no longer an issue. Furthermore, since little Xian Miao prepared the dragon nest and even provided those shiny little items, the black dragon Meryl was quite courteous to her. Upon hearing Meryl's words, a hint of amusement appeared in little Xian Miao's eyes. She pulled out a homemade large brush from behind and adeptly approached Meryl to brush her scale armor. Feeling the rhythmically strong brushing by little Xian Miao, the black dragon Meryl squinted her eyes in comfort. Comfortable. Such treatment was truly comfortable. Sometimes, she almost forgot that she was actually a captive. Though these strange long-eared ones were cruel and evil, they served the dragons at a level the silly half-beasts couldn't match. Meryl indulged in the experience. Seeing her joyful expression, little Xian Miao continued brushing her back and laughed. "So, Lord Meryl, have you thought it over?" Hearing this, Meryl's expression gradually became cold. She snorted, lifting her proud dragon head. "Lord Meryl is a righteous dragon. No matter how you try to entice me, I will not become a servant of the evil god." Enjoyable as it was. But if they really thought it would be easy to get her on board that bandwagon, they were sorely mistaken. She was a righteous dragon. Upon hearing the black dragon's words, little Xian Miao was not upset and continued brushing while saying, "But, you've been with us for so many days. Based on your observations, are we truly evil?" Hearing little Xian Miao's words, the black dragon Meryl fell silent. Were the long-eared ones really evil? After observing them these days, honestly, she was no longer so sure. Aside from the initial day of battle, she had never seen these strange creatures fall into bloodlust and madness. Not only that, they worked tirelessly like little bees in the town, building their homes. Furthermore, they were very harmonious amongst themselves, and Meryl hadn't even seen them fighting each other. This was a common occurrence in the half-beast tribe, mind you. Of course, she didn't know that this was because, after a player versus player fight destroyed a house once, Eve had since forbidden players from fighting in the main city. I think, at least compared to the half-beasts, we're far from evil. Seeing Meryl silent, little Xian Miao continued. Hearing this, Meryl immediately became displeased. That's just your personal view. In my eyes, they may not be as smart and capable as you, but they're simple and honest. I don't believe they're as evil as you claim. Hearing the black dragon's words, little Xian Miao felt a bit helpless. This dragon was truly stubborn. As she pondered how to continue persuading, suddenly, the black dragon Meryl rose from her nest. Little Xian Miao was startled and quickly backed away. The little black dragon suddenly became very agitated, her eyes turning red and breathing heavily, seemingly falling into a rage. What's wrong with you? Little Xian Miao cautiously asked. The black dragon Meryl didn't answer. She leaped from the nest where she had been lying for days and roared to the sky. Who dared to touch Lord Meryl's treasure? Someone had tampered with her belongings. Her treasures, left in the castle, had been meddled with. Just moments ago, she sensed that all the magical protections she had set to guard her treasure had been destroyed. Meryl took a deep breath and chanted a melodious dragon incantation. A necklace hanging around her neck slowly rose. This necklace was a magical tool given by her foster father, her contingency plan, capable of monitoring her treasure. The necklace emitted a faint glow and projected an image of the castle before Meryl. And in that image, a group of half-beasts was continuously hauling out her long-cherished gold and silver treasures from the castle. Meryl. In an instant, the little black dragon was furious. Damn it! These despicable, lowly, shameless, cunning, evil scoundrels! Rua! Lord Meryl must eat you all. Chapter 115. These bandits! Liars! They actually dared to steal Lord Meryl's treasure while he was away, the little black dragon thought. The little black dragon was furious, and the consequences were severe. It did not hesitate and immediately flapped its wings, flying up to rush back to its castle to defend its treasure to the death. However, just as it dashed out of the town, a familiar and obnoxious voice echoed in its mind. If you wish to become part of someone else's dragon-slaying legend, then go ahead and return on your own. Meryl halted. It looked towards the direction of the temple, its eyes bloodshot. What do you mean? The voice sighed. The divine favored of the god of winter and hunting has arrived, possessing the strength of the lower gold. My clansmen have already encountered him. The divine favored. Meryl's pupils contracted slightly. Having witnessed Eve's tactics, it had already developed a fear of the power of true gods. Since they dared to tamper with your things, they surely wouldn't fear your return. Perhaps they're even waiting for your return. The title of Dragon Slayer is a badge of honor for many intelligent beings. Eve continued to coax. While she suspected the truth was likely that the half-beast thought Meryl had died, she figured it was enough to manipulate the little black dragon. How dare they? Meryl will surely eat them, the little black dragon declared in anger. I suspect Euler's interest in dragons is even greater than mine. If he becomes intrigued, think about it, she said. His dominion, after all, includes hunting, Eve continued. In reality, though the night prowler was of lower gold, Meryl was a dragon. Dragons were nearly invincible at the same rank, and the Blood clan had always been weak in direct combat. If the little black dragon faced him, without the night prowler borrowing divine power, Eve estimated it would be a stalemate, at least capable of escaping. But that didn't stop Eve from using Euler to frighten it. Hearing these words, the little black dragon wilted at once. It remembered the humiliation and fear of being captured by this evil god. It did not wish to undergo such an ordeal again. I am a mortal enemy of Euler. If you submit to me, I will dispatch my clansmen to help you retrieve your treasure, Eve proposed. The mask of the half-beasts has been torn off. I trust you don't still see them as friendly creatures, do you? As for their believers, I've no doubt Euler's temperament you can imagine somewhat. Eve continued to coax. After hearing her words, Meryl was silent. Truth be told, this evil god had been pretty good to it. If there were another true god, Meryl really couldn't be sure what would happen to him. Besides, those half-beasts dared to target its treasure. Any creature daring to steal a dragon's treasure was an enemy of the dragon. It really had misunderstood those guys. Perhaps, this mysterious true god was right, it was deceived by the half-beasts. When it thought of how life had been since the true god captured it, barring its movements but allowing it to live in the town with food, drink, flattery, and massages. Compared to its former life, Meryl was somewhat tempted. Perhaps, it wasn't too bad? If you help me retrieve my treasure, Meryl might not be unwilling to stand on your side, the little black dragon said, turning its head arrogantly. Of course, Eve replied with a smile. With the true god's confirmation, Meryl breathed a sigh of relief. It struggled briefly before coming to a decision. The little black dragon then descended from the sky and slightly bowed its head towards the statue. Then, Your True Grace, please tell Meryl your true name. Eve Yggdrasil. The ethereal holy voice reverberated in Meryl's heart. Yggdrasil? Meryl was slightly taken aback. Yggdrasil, this name, why does it sound so familiar? Meryl murmured. Yggdrasil. Suddenly, the little black dragon raised its head, its dragon face full of excitement and shock. World Tree. You are the World Tree. The World Tree that opposes the wicked black dragon Nidhogg. When Bento woke up again, he discovered he was tightly bound with ropes, even a cloth gag over his mouth. He furrowed his brow slightly, instinctively trying to break free, only to find that the ropes seemed very special, capable of restraining his power. Roughly glancing around, he realized he was confined within a space that resembled a cargo box. It was dark all around, and the entire space was swaying slightly. The cargo box was wooden, with gaps that allowed him to see outside. Bento leaned closer and, through the gaps, saw a forest outside, with the scenery continuously moving backward. At the same time, he also saw several fully armed human mercenaries escorting the cargo box as they moved forward. Cargo box? Cart? Humans? Something stirred within him. Just then, the sound of rustling came from beside him, and Bento cautiously turned his head, seeing another petite figure. It was another bound female elf, leaning against the goods and sleeping soundly, her long eyelashes fluttering slightly. NPC? Bento furrowed his brow slightly. He remained silent for a moment, then closed his eyes and opened the chat interface in the game system. When he entered the interface, he found his messages were flooded, all from his party members. Bento. Where are you? You didn't get captured by that weird guy we saw, did you? Bento, message us when you log back in. The black dragon has been subdued by the goddess. He's preparing to lead everyone to destroy the half-beast base. Captain, there's a new main quest. We've gone to get the quest, join us when you log back in. A new main quest? Bento paused. He checked the quest system, indeed finding a new one, destroy the half-beast base. He hesitated for a moment, accepted the quest, and then applied to join the party. Unlike other online games, in Elf Kingdom, players automatically left parties upon disconnection, requiring rejoining upon logging back in. As soon as Bento rejoined the party, the channel buzzed with activity. Captain! You finally logged in. Where were you? Why were you offline for so long? Come to Elf Town, we're gathering to start a big raid. This time the black dragon's leading. Not sure what the goddess did, but that lazy dragon who only knows how to eat roast meat suddenly became very diligent and submitted immediately. Haha, I heard the half-beasts raided Meryl's lair, the little black dragon is fuming. After reading the others' messages, Bento thought for a moment and replied. I couldn't log in earlier, now it seems I've been captured by humans. The teammates were astonished. Captured? What the hell? Wait. Humans? Did you encounter humans, Bento? Hey? Bento, your coordinates are so far away. And slowly moving. Hidden storyline. This must be a hidden storyline. Then, Bento suddenly heard the humans outside start chatting. Hey, today's luck is amazing. We not only made a fortune from the half-beasts but also picked up an injured elf on the way. Sold so many magic materials at a high price in one go, plus the 2 elves, we're gonna be rich this time. After this job, I'm applying for retirement from the guild. Hehe, I'm not young anymore, and I've saved enough to settle down. Jealous. This is just my second escort. By the way, weren't the half-beast tribes always very poor? Why'd they suddenly have so much money? You wouldn't know. I heard they raided a black dragon's lair. Daring. Don't they fear retaliation? Having done so, I assume the black dragon was already taken care of. And why'd they buy so many magic materials? Those are for mages, not their burly kind. Humph, they were desperate for us to leave after selling the goods, no idea what they're up to. Hehe, you're asking the right person. I overheard the guild's mage talking about it. Apparently, the half-beasts bought materials for cross-dimensional summoning. Hehe, they're followers of the hunting god. This time, the true god must have plans against some unlucky power, maybe, the elves. Summoning the divine envoy again? Tisk tisk, daring. These decades, it's been the half-beasts making the most noise, with the god of winter and hunting expanding his influence, unafraid of provoking other churches. Why care so much? It's not the human realm here, the more chaos, the better, means more money for us. Chapter 116. Black Dragon Nest? Magic Materials? Divine Envoy? Hearing these words, He Fan's eyes narrowed slightly. After some thought, he replied in the chat system. Perhaps, it really is a hidden quest. I heard them talking about the half-beast's secret. Then, He Fan sent the message he had just heard word for word. Upon receiving the message, his teammates immediately perked up. Wow! Summoning a divine envoy? Could this be quest intel? Very likely. Big He Fan. You might have really triggered a hidden quest. Quick, report to Holy Daughter. Maybe you can trigger something. Soon, a few teammates stopped talking, and it seemed they had gone to find Alice. The remaining teammates continued to ask on the team channel. Big He Fan, you are trapped right now. Do you need us to come and help you? He Fan glanced at the mini-map, pondered for a moment, and replied. No need, it's too far. It was indeed too far. He was now over 100 kilometers from the core area of the elf forest. Even with navigation, without a higher tier being to lead the way, the players couldn't catch up. Not to mention, the players were busy preparing for the main storyline mission. It's temporarily safe here. I'll handle it myself. You guys focus on the main storyline mission first. He Fan replied. Seeing He Fan's response, his teammates did not insist further. Right now, they were indeed more interested in the main storyline mission. After all, the main storyline is known for its rich rewards. Besides, it's still uncertain what He Fan had triggered. Of course, the most critical reason was that it was too far. Summon a divine envoy. Upon hearing news from the chosen ones, Alice's expression became solemn. Could it be the totem guardian? After the world tree fell, the elves were hunted by many races, especially the half-beasts. During this period, the half-beasts had summoned Yggdrasil's divine envoy the totem guardian to attack elf settlements several times. And after the divine war, some of the remaining high-end combat power in the elves were sacrificed under the attack of the totem guardian. After some consideration, Alice said. This information is crucial. I think, this is likely a plot by the half-beasts against the Mother Goddess. I will report this to the Mother Goddess immediately. Also, I ask you to contact He Fan and have him be patient for a while. He is likely encountering a human smuggling caravan. It is said they have a base near the Dark Mountain Range. This is also an opportunity to attack a human smuggling outpost. We might even rescue some fellow elves. The players' names were each more comically absurd than the last. However, because Eve had long used the game system to interfere, when players spoke their names, they would automatically be converted into phonetically acceptable terms for the natives. So while sometimes they sounded a bit strange, it ultimately wasn't a problem. Smuggling caravan? Rescue fellow elves? The eyes of a few players lit up. Perhaps, this is the hidden quest that He Fan encountered. After informing the chosen ones, Alice quickly went to the natural temple to pray. Totem Guardian. Eve was slightly moved in her heart. Considering the vampire divine favorit's behavior, she quickly guessed Yggdrasil's intentions. Is it thought that my condition is weak and they want to catch me in one fell swoop? The reason, Eve could roughly guess. A true god is a true god after all. Unless genuinely weak, why would they hide? Of course, the real reason Eve hid wasn't that she was weak, but that her true identity could not be exposed. And after leaving the near-death state, her divine power was still weak, but far stronger than before. Thinking of this, she issued a divine decree to Alice. I have already learned of the matter. I will grant divine favored El the ability to summon my avatar. Let him journey with you all. With the repairs over the past few days, Hela's treasure bead had been completely repaired by Eve, and she could now use it to exercise demigod-level power through her avatar. However, because this was not a demigod avatar that directly consumed 100 points of divine power to condense, but one cleverly made using the Death God's treasure bead, the demigod avatar could only descend for a short time. Maybe, it could last 10 minutes. After issuing the divine decree to Alice, Eve shifted her attention to He-Fan. In fact, when the Night Stalker abandoned He-Fan, Eve had already taken notice. But to her surprise, whether He-Fan was considered lucky or unlucky, he was picked up by a human caravan. As for the native elf also imprisoned in the caravan, it was a pleasant surprise. The rescue would certainly happen, but not now. The priority was to destroy the half-beast's outpost, which was critical to the southeast exit of the elf forest. Moreover, Eve was quite interested in Euler's totem guardian. As for the human caravan, Eve planned to play a long game. After observing the direction in which the human caravan was moving, Eve was slightly moved towards the dark mountain range. After pondering for a moment, Eve used her divine power. At the same time, He-Fan received a new system message. Ding! You have triggered a hidden task, human caravan. Plot description: human smuggling caravans have been active across the continent, secretly conducting elf trafficking. You decide to use this opportunity of being captured to secretly investigate the human caravan's base near the elf forest. Task content: stay with the human caravan, investigate the human base, and protect the elf fellows. Protect elf fellows. He-Fan was silent for a moment, looking at the nearby sleeping female elf. This unfamiliar elf girl was tightly bound, yet she slept soundly, as if she had returned to her own home. He-Fan. He took a deep breath and began to meditate. The whole person was as obedient as a soldier following orders. Main task: destroy the half-beast's outpost. After thoroughly subduing Black Dragon Merrill and having him as a guide, Eve issued a new task. This time, almost every player who had advanced to Black Iron level chose to participate. Unlike previous small outposts, this time they were genuinely attacking the half-beast's lair. These days, whether it was building towns, working for the Flame Tribe's elves, or hunting demon beasts, although there was still plenty of fun, players preferred the grand spectacle of fighting the half-beasts in large battles. Exciting. Spectacular. Lively. And more importantly, it really felt like war. For players from Tianchao who lived in peaceful times, there was a unique allure. And on this occasion, both Alice and Elle would accompany the mission. Even the elves from the Flame Tribe were eager for action. Especially the young ones who were less than 200 years old and full of enthusiasm. Of course, they were still stopped by the elders, and the reason was simple. The chosen ones can resurrect, can you? However, even so, it didn't dampen the young elves' enthusiasm. The chosen ones are the apostles of the Mother Goddess, and the beliefs of the chosen ones are the beliefs of the Mother Goddess. Even divine favored El, with royal lineage, had changed his views, hadn't he? We hold on to kindness and justice, are they always right? With this mindset, as they further interacted with the players, the native elves of Segis world gradually changed. Years of experience combined with the guidance of the Mother Goddess led some to finally realize. Boundless mercy is not a virtue. Facing enemies, only the sword and blood are the truth. Although there were still few who thought this way, for the stubborn elves, it was a significant change. Chapter 117. Grandmother Philosier, I'm sorry. I still think we should join the chosen ones. A young elf looked firmly at the old clan leader of the Flame Tribe, his still slightly immature voice carrying a hint of fervor. These days, I've seen a side of them I've never seen before. They are always full of energy, brimming with passion, tirelessly dedicated, they're always fighting for a better future. Not only that, they're always selflessly helping us. His voice carried a hint of emotion, his words full of resolve. They are our partners. I believe that if they choose to fight, we cannot stand by. I agree. Another young elf nodded as he excitedly said. I've always been thinking, is our belief really right? Is kindness always right? I once engaged in discussions and debates with the chosen ones about this issue, and even had some disputes. But later, their words completely enlightened me. The struggle between races and beliefs is not a dinner party, not about kindness and tolerance, and definitely not passive acceptance. This is war. War is cruel, a violent action where one race overcomes another. Being kind to others is being cruel to yourself. For the beta testers, many of whom were also internet trolls used to arguing endlessly online, it was too easy to use harsh theories to persuade young elves as pure as blank paper. There's plenty of similar material on Earth. A little magic modification, and it'd be enough. Seeing these young elves who had almost changed completely after just a few days with the Chosen Ones, Philosier was stunned. You all. She could understand the enthusiasm of the young elves, but, with the Flame Tribe having so few people left, she really didn't want to see clan members taking risks again. But seeing those determined eyes and recalling Mother Goddess's various hints, the old clan leader could only sigh deeply. Ah, do as you will. But, make sure to stay safe. The elf clan was about to change. Even though many of the old elves did not allow it, still, over 10 young elves sneaked out, deciding to join the players' actions. However, this made the players quite troubled. To the players, these native NPCs were not only tools to exploit but also a bunch of revered figures. Because the goddess herself required in her task. No NPC deaths were allowed. If any NPCs died, the players' task rewards would be severely penalized. So, what the players most wished for was for the elves to stay obediently in Felenqui. But, there was another requirement from the goddess's task. Players could not stop the NPCs if they chose to participate in the battle. Player. Fine. The NPCs were revered entities, and the goddess was the supreme leader whose words had to be heeded. This, practically meant that they had to escort a group of celebrated figures into battle, increasing the difficulty several times over. Were the NPCs really the tools, or were they the tools? However, after some consideration, Li Mu, who was in charge of team command, finally came up with a good idea. Simply, let these dozen young elves serve as the back row. The elves generally had decent archery skills. Having them as back row archers would not only be safe but also provide good support. They were far better than those archery class players. Even with skill support, those who chose the archer class, frankly speaking, their accuracy was nothing commendable. Especially those who had learned only attack enhancement skills without choosing to learn targeted aiming skills, their arrows were a disaster. But the most excited and enthusiastic about this operation wasn't the players, nor the native elves, nor was it Alice and the others. It was Black Dragon Meryl. The goddess had communicated something to it, causing the once resistant little black dragon to change its nature and become compliant. This surprised both the players and elves, who were once again amazed at the persuasive power of the goddess. Actually, even Eve didn't expect that the little black dragon would become so enthusiastic after learning her true identity. However, the name Meryl mentioned was known. Nidhogg. That was an ancient black dragon that participated in the Divine War 1,000 years ago, possessing formidable strength that even made true gods wary. It was also the one that gnawed at the roots of the World Tree, causing the former World Tree's power to plummet. This little oddball is so hostile toward Nygrod, praising justice, and claims to be a silver dragon. Could it be, a silver dragon raised it? Eve speculated about the little one's foster parent. The evil black dragon Nygrod had always been the arch-enemy of the silver dragons. And the silver dragons, according to the World Tree legacy Eve received, had a decent relationship with the World Tree. However, after lying under the World Tree for so long, Meryl didn't recognize it but only exclaimed, "What a big tree," truly showcasing some of the Dragon Clan's catchy personalities. Elf Forest. The players' team had gradually gathered and was uniformly teleported to Felenqui. After some development, over 900 of the 1,200 beta testers had been promoted to the Black Iron rank, and more than 800 had taken this main quest. Under Li Mu's unified command, the players formed a simple formation, truly evoking a taste of military discipline. Besides the players, a dozen young elves from the Flame Tribe joined the team too. More than 100 elves from the Flame Tribe also came under the leadership of clan leader Philosier to see the team off. These days, with the players' help, the elves had completely settled in Felenqui, and they were very grateful to the players. Although, as the Holy Daughter mentioned, the Chosen Ones indeed had some bad habits, like eating meat, liking to take small advantages, being full of crooked logic, being a little too obsequious, or knocking on your door in the middle of the night, etc., etc. Overall, however, they were enthusiastic, hardworking, and truly striving for the future of the elf clan. Even the most rigid and stubborn elves couldn't deny the help and contribution of the chosen ones. Watching each chosen one, who although appeared lax, was filled with excitement and showed no fear, Philosier secretly nodded. Though their discipline was lacking, they were indeed a team willing to risk everything. Not fearing death was the most terrifying aspect. With their immortality trait, as well as the assistance of the Black Dragon, the Holy Daughter, and the Divine Favored, maybe, they could really defeat the half-beast forces entrenched for years near the elf forest and force them to migrate. She turned back, beckoning, and took some magic materials from the hands of her clan members. These are the materials needed to create a teleportation array. I heard from the Holy Daughter that what you lack most right now are these things. I stayed up all night with a few elf mages from the tribe to make them. Teleportation array. Li Mu's eyes lit up. This was the most critical item for this operation. According to the little black dragon, the half-beast settlement was very far from here. Even with the forest affinity, it would still take over 20 days for the elves to travel there themselves. Moreover, there were thousands of half-beasts. To be honest, without the intervention of the black dragon or El, sending the players would be a death sentence. They were generally weak, their only notable advantage was their ability to resurrect and their capability to cooperate as a team in a sacrificial flow. But if they were to die in the half-beast tribe, it would be too late to respawn at the revival point. However, it would be different with the teleportation array. Li Mu nodded at little Xian Miao and Cuckoo Bird, who had been waiting for a while, and they quickly took the array materials, thanking repeatedly. Thank you so much. Philosier waved her hand while sighing. This is all we can do. Active raids on the half-beasts had the young elves enthusiastic, but most native elves were still not very interested. After receiving the array materials, little Xian Miao waved to Black Dragon Meryl. We've got the materials. We're setting off now. Meryl glanced at the two female players, then reluctantly lay down, muttering. This one time carrying you, you'll have to grill me meat for a day, no, 3 days when we get back. Hearing this, little Xian Miao smiled with her eyes crescent-shaped. 3 days? A week will do. After saying this, she and the Cuckoo Bird took the materials for the magic array and jumped onto the back of Black Dragon Meryl, under the envious eyes of the players. Once they were seated, Black Dragon Meryl let out a long roar, flapped its wings, and slowly took off. Watching the Black Dragon getting smaller in view, Dimasha kept sighing. If you want to be a dragon knight, you need money. Hearing this, Li Mu rolled his eyes. I think even if you have the money, you won't make it. Dimasha. Big brother, can you stop being a buzzkill? Chapter 118. Meng's Haihan was a common player during the second test. As an ordinary person who neither grinned, spent money, nor had great luck, it was only 3 days ago that she accumulated enough experience and contribution points to switch jobs and become an 11th level druid. Actually, it should have been faster. According to the first test players, when there were many small monsters in the core area originally, everyone formed teams to grind them, and the experience points increased rapidly. That was quite exhilarating. But unfortunately, the low-level monsters in the core area of Elf Town, which were perfect for practice, have long been wiped out. They either became experience points or turned into fertilizer. What sets Elf Kingdom apart from other games is that it perfectly mimicked reality, with creatures forming their own ecosystem. If you killed it, it was gone. And what's left are the big creatures that rookies cannot provoke. Unless you have money to pay a high price to hire the First Legion Guild's boss team to help you grind the big monsters, you can only work slowly. So, most unlucky second test players who neither grinned nor paid money had no choice but to slowly do tasks to level up. However, many people learned some skills through tasks that they hadn't learned in real life. Like cutting trees, building walls, and barbecuing. Overall, as the number of players increased over time, the trend of polarization became gradually evident. The strong became stronger, while the weak became weaker. Even though there were still ways to become stronger, the best resources were always first obtained by the strong. If you didn't have money or luck, latecomers could only rely on grinding. This mechanism even received criticism from players, with a group of people complaining on the forums that it was too unreasonable. Everyone believed that it's good to mimic reality so realistically, but if it goes overboard, what's the difference from reality? Reality was already so cruel, couldn't there be a break from reality in the game? Many people even shouted about quitting the game. Although, nobody actually quit in the end. Meng's Haihan, however, was very open-minded about it. In her view, Choosing something meant losing something else. Since the slogan of Elf Kingdom was to be the most realistic and with the most epic feel, perhaps these mechanisms were the official choice. The official must have considered more to create such a masterpiece. Moreover, even if the game system was so quirky, with the industry's unique realistic five senses, intelligent NPCs, and cheat-like thinking acceleration, everyone could only endure the pain and find joy. Now, there were still plenty of players online pitifully waiting for the public test. The reason she chose the druid profession was because Meng's Haihan had always especially liked the healer profession in the games she played before. The healer class had always been a popular profession with good job prospects in online games. If you had deft movement, sharp operation, and ample healing, you would undoubtedly be welcomed by major guilds. So she had decided early on to be a druid, the only class with healing skills. In fact, if possible, she preferred to choose the priest profession. Up until now, there were still videos secretly recorded by players on the official website showing the Holy Daughter casting group heals. That special effect, it was simply dazzlingly beautiful and cool. Of course, the special effects of the goddess were even more impressive, but the goddess was a goddess, incomparable, right? Unfortunately, possibly due to game version issues, the priest profession was not available to players, so she had to settle for druid. This was her first time participating in a main storyline task. Previously, due to the slow level up, she had always eagerly wanted to participate in the legendary main storyline. However, she couldn't take on tasks because her level was too low. But this time, she finally had the chance. To this end, she decided to spend her hard-earned 2,000 contribution points to exchange for a new skill. The healer is easily targeted, so she decided to exchange for an escape type, right? Based on her previous online gaming experience, Meng's Haihan made the decision. However, before exchanging skills, she got a reminder from guild leader Li Mu. You already have 2 healing skills. This time, if you want to gain more experience and contribution points, he said, I suggest you exchange for a single target control skill. Control skill. Meng's Haihan was slightly confused, then said somewhat uncertainly, but I heard from some experts that those half-beasts have high levels, and the control-type magic cast on them is quickly broken free. Li Mu was silent for a moment, then said, if you only control the half-beasts, indeed, it won't work. However, if players restrain them, you can use strong single-target control to control them altogether. Upon hearing Li Mu's words, Meng's Haihan suddenly understood, oh. Right, other players can interfere with the half-beasts. But then she quickly was stunned, wait, control them altogether? Altogether. Li Mu nodded and said, a 1-for-1 sacrifice strategy. The Black Iron lower attack type skills, in theory, can already cause fatal damage to the half-beasts, but the half-beasts won't stand still for us to attack, causing the attacks to be ineffective. But if we follow the sacrifice strategy, they become sitting ducks. This is the most efficient way to kill enemies. Anyway, we can be resurrected, and the guild will uniformly provide the required contribution points for perfect resurrection to those who sacrifice themselves. Meng's Haihan. The contribution shop also allowed the exchange of contribution points for perfect resurrection. Now, the perfect resurrection times obtained from tasks were becoming less and less, gradually leading players to choose exchange through contribution points, with 1,000 points for 1 resurrection. It was quite expensive. But each half-beast's head was worth at least 1,200 contribution points, and higher level half-beasts would be worth even more. So, in a life-for-a-life situation, though the difference was only 200 points, it was still a small profit. Not to mention, there was still experience to be gained. However, not everyone received the contribution point reward. Since the second internal test of the game, all reward acquisitions had been distributed based on contributions. So, the 1,200 points of contribution would be allocated to heads based on contribution. Generally speaking, with such calculation, players who sacrificed themselves would suffer losses, even if their contribution scores were higher. But the guild had this benefit. The perfect resurrection for sacrificed players wasn't borne by them, instead, the guild collectively accumulated contribution points to purchase it. This was also a path that players groped out through constant exploration. So, when the time comes, just boldly throw control on them. The sacrificed players will position themselves conveniently for your control. Also, the charge command is Yura, and the sacrifice command is fire at me. Don't throw it on the wrong person. Li Mu instructed. Meng's Hai Han. Rock Cave Tribe. Having gathered up the treasures left by Black Dragon Merrill in the castle, even the well-informed night wanderers couldn't help but marvel that the dragon nest was indeed wealthy. Though it was said that the other party was just a young dragon, the amassed wealth equaled the annual income of a typical human town. Half-beast priest Jushin was also incredibly delighted. Even after excluding the cost of purchasing magic materials through human smuggling caravans, the remaining wealth was enough for them to make a small fortune. However, as he was overjoyed, a half-beast guard suddenly stumbled in from the outside. His expression was frantic, and his voice trembled with fear. High Priest. No, it's not good. That black dragon has returned. Chapter 119. The Black Dragon is back. Jushin and Night Prowler were both taken aback. Night Prowler glanced at the half-beast priest, his brow furrowing. Didn't you say the Black Dragon was dead? Feeling the intimidating presence emanating from Night Prowler, Jushin's scalp tingled. Count, this, it hasn't returned at all, and the warriors who went with our tribe also. He was somewhat at a loss for words. Night Prowler sighed and said. Forget it. Let's go out and see what's really going on. Dragons have always regarded treasure as their exclusive possession. Even though it's just a young black dragon, we can't be careless. With that, he was the first to walk out of the main tent of the tribe. Noticing that Night Prowler didn't seem overly tense, Jushin also breathed a sigh of relief. With a high-level divine favored present and about to summon a divine envoy, a mere silver-upper young black dragon shouldn't pose too much of a threat to the tribe. When they arrived outside, they could hear the black dragon's angry roar from afar. Rua! You despicable, shameless, evil, and treacherous half-beasts! Return Lord Merrill's treasure immediately. Otherwise, Lord Merrill will surely devour you all. It stood atop the castle on the mountain, overlooking the rock cave tribe at the mountainside, its voice carrying far and wide. The intimidating dragon's might spread from afar, along with the unmistakable threat in its words, causing a stir among the half-beasts of the rock cave tribe. Looking at the imposing black dragon, Night Prowler smiled slightly and said. Honorable Black Dragon, your treasure has been temporarily requisitioned by the true God. I can swear on my soul that I will return it to you threefold in a week. Threefold. In an instant, Merrill's eyes widened, a hint of intrigue flashing across its expression. Ahem. At this moment, the hidden little Xian Miao behind it quickly cleared her throat, reminding it. Merrill, I heard they're preparing to summon demigod-level power. If they succeed, do you think you can still escape? Think about the righteous cause, the soothing massages, the honey-glazed roast. The half-beast's divine spirit is not necessarily as easy to talk to as the goddess. Righteousness? Massage? Roast? Merrill's eyes lit up, and it unconsciously swallowed. But soon, it snapped back to reality. Demigod level. In an instant, Merrill's face turned green. Those damned fools! They're deceiving it again. Merrill, delay them for a while and attract their attention. Gugigbird and I will get the array ready as soon as possible. Seeing the silly little black dragon realized its situation, little Xian Miao continued to instruct it. As she spoke, she rubbed her temples in frustration. The players initially planned a sneak attack. But who would have thought that this reckless little black dragon would directly fly them to the mountaintop of the half-beast tribe? Upon hearing her words, Merrill nodded, then loudly declared downhill. Rua! No way! Merrill wants her treasure now. Otherwise, Lord Merrill will destroy your tribe this instant. This statement immediately incited panic among the half-beasts. Night Prowler furrowed his brows tightly. This was a critical moment, and he couldn't afford to be delayed by the black dragon's interference. He had to find a way to appease this black dragon temporarily. Although his strength was a rank higher than the black dragon's, he wasn't confident he could kill it. He didn't want another troublesome enemy. Therefore, Night Prowler continued. Apologies, esteemed Black Dragon, I won't hide the truth from you. Your treasure has already been used by us, but you needn't worry. I can swear by the true God that I will give you a satisfactory answer in a week. Not only that, but if you join our cause, I will reward you tenfold. His stance was very humble. Generally, dragons still had some fear of the true God, especially those below the legendary rank. They would maintain a certain level of respect when facing the divine favored of the true God. Night Prowler also believed that this explanation could appease and even persuade the black dragon. Tenfold treasure was tempting for any dragon. Meryl's eyes indeed flickered. But then, the soft cough came again from behind. The voice was gentle but filled with disdain, speaking with grand confidence. Ahem, isn't it just treasure? I can find a way to get you as much as you want in the future. And I'll definitely keep my word more than he does. Meryl was swayed. It subtly gave little Xian Miao a look that said, I trust you, don't deceive me, and then turned its gaze back downhill. As it roared and snarled at Night Prowler, it threatened. No way. No deal. Meryl wants it now. 3-fold. No, 10-fold now. Otherwise, Meryl will spit dragon breath now. Night Prowler. This black dragon was utterly unreasonable. Was its brain damaged? He had a headache. He neither had the ability to kill the black dragon nor satisfy its demands immediately, so they were at a standstill from a distance. However, as the conversation went on, Night Prowler gradually realized that the black dragon seemed apprehensive of his strength and was only making noise. It didn't even dare to fly down from the mountaintop. But, what was the point? What good did it do besides wasting time? Night Prowler felt he had met a greedy black dragon with a problem in its brain. Wait a minute. Stalling for time? Suddenly, a flash of insight struck Night Prowler, and his expression turned serious. At the same time, a strong spatial fluctuation emanated from the castle at the mountaintop. Spatial magic fluctuation? Oh no! It's teleportation! Night Prowler's expression slightly changed. Instantly, his sight was filled with countless small figures. They were elves wielding weapons. Elves? Night Prowler was initially confused, but then his expression turned grim. Those were the elves from the elf forest. Those elves had actually tamed an evil and greedy black dragon? How did they manage that? If it were a good aligned metallic dragon, maybe, but an evil chromatic dragon? Especially the notoriously treacherous and rebellious black dragon. For a moment, Night Prowler couldn't believe his eyes. At the same time, Black Dragon Meryl became excited. It opened its wings, roared Rua, and swooped down the mountain, opening its mouth to unleash dragon breath. Night Prowler's expression was grim, and he didn't bother with the black dragon. He shouted the enemy's attack while retreating to the main tent. Jushin, the half-beast, was stunned by the sudden turn of events. The elves actually launched an attack. His expression was filled with wonder. Elves initiating an attack was indeed the biggest joke in the Segis world. Even knowing the elves from the elf forest were a bit unusual, he didn't think such a day would come. Initiating an attack was simply not something that could happen with these peace-loving, submissive, long-eared creatures. But soon, he snapped back to reality, roaring. Enemies! Quickly blow the alarm horn! Accompanied by the prolonged sound of a horn, the entire rock cave tribe began to mobilize. Meanwhile, at the mountaintop, seeing the black dragon charging down recklessly, little Xian Miao was even more annoyed. You idiot! Why are you charging? Can you beat high-level professionals? Not everyone is here yet. Come back and protect the teleportation array first. Chapter 120. Black Dragon Meryl was like a husky charging into a flock of chickens, throwing the rock cave tribe into chaos. Even though she had been raised improperly, Meryl still inherited some traditional traits of a black dragon. For example, when confronting enemies, she loved to attack the weak first and enjoyed watching the enemy's fear. The half-orc warriors who had just been gathered by the sound of the horn were immediately met with dragon breath in their faces. Their formation scattered at once, and they began to flee in all directions. As the dragon with the strongest hand-to-hand combat ability, the little black dragon had thick skin and a solid body, so the half-orc's attacks were nothing more than scratches to her. Is that even possible? Watching the little black dragon throw the half-beast tribe into utter disorder in an instant, little Xian Miao was stunned. It was chaos, the rock cave tribe was already in chaos. Black Dragon Meryl was like a wolf entering a flock of sheep, causing a bloody storm. The great strength of the silver upper peak was something that no half-orc in the rock cave tribe could resist. Watching the rampaging black dragon and the continuous casualties of his tribesmen, High Priest Jushin's eyes were red. Lord Earl! Lord Earl! Please stop the black dragon quickly! The Night Wanderer assumed a stern expression and silently recited an incantation, summoning a massive three-headed demon dog. It was a silver upper peak level demon beast, the strongest favored beast under the Night Wanderer. It had a pair of bat wings, jet black fur, a ferocious appearance, and its size was actually half that of the black dragon. The Blood Clan's frontal combat strength was relatively weak, so they often raised some demon beasts to supplement their combat power. And the Night Wanderer's strongest favored beast was a Dibby's demon dog with hell 3-headed dog bloodline. Entangle that black dragon. The Night Wanderer ordered the demon dog. Upon receiving its master's command, the demon dog let out a long howl and lunged at the black dragon. Demon dog. Meryl's eyes lit up and she immediately met the attack, engaging it in combat. However, it was clear that the demon dog was not a match for the black dragon, as several wounds appeared on it in the blink of an eye. Having sent out his favored beast, the Night Wanderer coldly glanced at Jushin and said, "The black dragon and the elves have come. I'm afraid that the death god and the divine favored of that mysterious new god will arrive soon. My demon dog is certainly no match for the black dragon and can't hold out for long, and I cannot intervene. I must hurry to complete the summoning of the divine envoy. Do you see the elves on the mountain top? They must have already built a teleportation array. If you don't want the rock cave tribe to be annihilated, then lead people to rush up and destroy it quickly. Even if you can't destroy it, you must stall them until I successfully summon the divine envoy. These elves are very weak, even if they are a bit peculiar, they won't be able to be a match for you." After saying that, the Night Wanderer left. God. Divine favored. Hearing this term, Jushin's eyes narrowed sharply. His expression changed, and finally, he gritted his teeth and shouted to the Night Wanderer's back. "All right, we'll do it immediately, you, hurry up." By this time, the main group of players had also gradually completed their teleportation. Dimasha reached the mountaintop. Looking at the densely packed half-orc houses below, he couldn't help but exclaim. "My god! Just how many half-orcs are there?" Li Mu, who was at the very front, also showed surprise, but quickly frowned. "Weren't we supposed to be teleported into the nearby forest?" The black dragon definitely insisted on returning to its castle to see how much of its treasure is left. Little Xian Miao shrugged. "Li Mu. Tisk tisk. Looks like it's all gone, otherwise Silly Black wouldn't be so furious. Let's hurry up and join." The black dragon already stirred up the half-orcs. "Damn! The boss is about to be taken down too, there's all that loot and experience. I'm just one pair of shoes short of a full epic set." Dimasha looked at the 3-headed dog being chased and bitten by Meryl, with a pained expression. "Follow commands, don't act impulsively." Gugu Bird said coldly. "TCH, it's just a sacrificial strategy, I don't believe we can't wear them down." Dimasha sneered while adeptly removing his gear to hand over to his teammates, leaving only the oversized shorts that the native elves had given him, camouflaged with holy light. As the mightiest taunting tank, his task was still, to lead the team in a charge to their deaths this time. However, Li Mu stopped the players planning to rush in. "No rush, there are too many half-orcs, and we have too few people. Even if we charge down, we may not gain an advantage, even with Lord L's presence, it probably can't support long-term combat. Furthermore, it could lead to the rear being empty and the teleportation array being destroyed. We need to turn things around and force them to fight us. Here the terrain is elevated and easy to defend, plus there's the teleportation array. If they come to attack, we have the advantage." After hearing Li Mu's words, L, who was planning to rush in with Dimasha, immediately stopped. He looked at the Chosen One, stunned, and said, "But how do we get the half-orcs to attack us?" Li Mu was just about to answer when he saw the gathering half-orcs below, and his eyes suddenly brightened. "Don't worry, they're already coming." With that, he turned his head and shouted. "Mages, prepare spells. Destroy those elves' strongholds on the mountaintop." Jushin's orders were quickly relayed down. And after Black Dragon Meryl became entangled with the Night Wanderer's favored beast, the panicking half-orcs gradually calmed down. Under the command of Horns, they quickly formed ranks and began charging up the slope. The priests among the half-orcs also began to bestow various combat blessings on the warriors from the rear. In no time, the half-orcs roared like a tide, rushing toward the players. The players also adjusted their formation. At the forefront were fully armed tank warriors, and behind them was a group of daredevils stripped of their gear, among whom were players of the hunter class. Further back, were archers, mages, and druids, and the native elves with bows and arrows were protected in the core area. As he watched the approaching half-orcs, Li Mu's eyes narrowed slightly. Meanwhile, the other players panted heavily, their eyes shining with excitement. War! This was war! Mages, ready! As the half-orcs drew closer, Li Mu gradually raised his hand. Upon hearing his command, all the mage players began chanting spells. All kinds of magic, like fireballs and elemental blades, began to form around them. However, although the spells formed, they were not released yet. The half-orcs were approaching steadily. The players could now clearly see the ferocious faces and dagger-like tusks of the half-orcs. Once they were in range, Li Mu immediately shouted, anger tinging his voice. Fire! At his command, streams of brilliant magic shot out indiscriminately, smashing into the charging half-orcs. At the same time, a stirring and majestic system BGM suddenly played in the ears of every player. It was an epic war BGM chosen by Eve, very thrilling. All at once, with the music setting the mood, every player became impossibly energetic, their spirits lifted. In ancient times, drums and battle songs were played to boost soldiers' morale during wars. Similarly, in online games, during large-scale mass battles, players would often play passionate BGM to boost morale. But this time, Eve had taken care of everything. The music was so fitting, perfectly timed, igniting the players' passion for battle in an instant. With the rousing music, every player felt as if they were transformed into a hero wearing their underwear on the outside, ready to tank a nuke the next second, take down the boss, and save the world. Their breathing became heavier. They felt as if their blood was boiling, burning within them. They feared no death and felt invincible. The well-timed background music completely roused the players' fighting spirit. If their morale could be displayed, the players' morale would have been off the charts by now. The half-orcs raised their shields, and, blessed by the priests, didn't slow their pace. The magic swiftly arrived, causing fierce explosions. Even with their shields and the priests' protective divine arts, quite a few unlucky ones were seriously injured, but the remaining half-orcs quickly adjusted their formation and continued advancing. Roaring, they charged in, as the system background music reached its climax. Listening to the inspiring BGM, Li Mu's heart surged. In that moment, scenes from the game over the past few months flashed through his mind. The gradually developing town, strengthening players, bonfire parties filled with laughter, and the kind-hearted elves NPCs, full of gratitude and admiration for them. And the words Alice murmured while stroking the town's steel echoed again in his heart. Chosen ones, you will eventually become a great legend of the Segis world. At that moment, Li Mu suddenly felt like he had grasped the essence of the game. This was a game. But, it was also their adventure story, an epic chapter they were writing. In a flash, Li Mu felt his blood boil. He raised his druid's magic wand high and shouted excitedly. For the elf clan! Charge! Ural! The players also let out a roar, brandishing their weapons. The two sides finally clashed.